times to scorch you.
And that would be.
That's John.
Oh, I thought it was.
Hi, Harriet.
I thought it was
Good evening.
Alan.
Yeah. Okay, roll it.
All set.
I don't have a script in front of me. I gotta do this unscripted. Okay.
Well, you have it. You do, actually.
Welcome, everyone.
Sound like the Oval Office.
Listening audience, or viewing audience. So we're here for a special meeting tonight of the Wenham Board of Selectmen to interview 4 candidates for our open position of town administrator. And that we'll be first listening to the chairman of the search committee, Alex Began, and then the person who's in charge of MRI, Alan Gould, who we commissioned to conduct the search. And after some introductory comments by both of them, we will be interviewing the first candidate, then the second, the third, and the fourth, which will take a while. And so thank you for viewing and listening in, and that hopefully we're not too boring. And I'll bring up Alex, who's never boring, and that for a few. Why don't you come and sit down at the it feels like it's a Senate inquiry or something with that chair.
Yeah, it is, with some distance between.
Yeah, right.
Well,
just don't get too close, okay, Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Select Board. I'll just kind of, I guess, kick it off with a couple brief remarks about the screening committee. So thank you for selecting me among the others. So on the screening committee, initially we had 7 members, so myself and 6 others. And of course, as you're aware, we ran into some tight scheduling. You know, the calendars are kind of fraught with conflict early on. So we had 2 members who were, politely looking to decline the invitation to be part of this and their appointment. I tried to kind of keep them in the mix and hold on and make it work, but we ended up with 5, which I thought was fine. I would have been fine with 7, fine with 5, but we met 3 times as a committee. So we met on June 6th, June 10th, and June 15th. We started in terms of the process, which Alan Gould walked us through and oversaw and was really instrumental and made the whole process kind of very, very smooth with respect to the logistics and what was to happen. Our charge is obvious. It's to kind of narrow down the candidates, to start with the applicants that Alan at MRI had sort of made through the first round of, resumes, cover letters, essay responses, phone interviews and the like, bring them to us. We review all of those matters, select who we wanted to interview, and then interview those candidates. And then we kind of just worked backwards from the 15th, which was the full day Saturday session here, which we interviewed the candidates in person. Prior to that, we had just over a week. That was a Saturday. The Friday previous, 8 days before, we had all of the materials that I'm sure you have as well for the remaining candidates, for the finalists. So at that point, we were able to pick the semifinalists. We determined who we wanted to interview on that Friday the 10th. After our kickoff, kind of working backwards, after our logistics meeting on the 6th, at which we just kind of walked through the process, made sure the committee members were all sworn in, talked about the approach and right, just the basics. It was just kind of, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it, again, which Alan was phenomenal in kind of walking us through, because others on the committee had been through this. I had not. So it was a new process to me. And the first session was held in open session, our first meeting on the 6th. We weren't sure kind of exactly what was going to be an executive session. The second and third were. Again, that's new to me. With FinCom, we're not generally in executive session. So we convened, we entered executive session and remained in such on the 10th and the 15th for obvious reasons to protect the confidentiality of the process, but the 6th was open. I don't think the notes will reflect candidates' names, and so those once approved, will be public from all meetings. I think that's the case, right? Thanks, Catherine. So that's pretty much kind of how the process went. The end result, of course, leading up to the main event this evening for the Select Board to interview the finalist candidates it was the selection of 4 of those who we interviewed on Saturday the 15th. Our charge was to, of course, deliver those who we felt appropriate as finalists. Either 2 or 3 typically in talking with Jack, with Alan, with the caveat that if there was a close fourth, so to speak, if it wasn't, if it was very clear who the fourth would be and there was consistency across the screening committee members in terms of who that would be, then to move forward and provide that fourth candidate to Select Board as well for consideration. And that's exactly where we landed. It was really straightforward with regard to who among the semifinalists would be finalists. We feel we've got a great set of candidates for you, thanks to Alan. in organizing them and bringing them to us in the discussions that we had. All capable, all different backgrounds, diverse skill sets, different styles, and so on, as you'll see tonight and as you'll discuss with the candidates.
Any questions, Catherine?
No, that's very clear,
John?
as usual.
No, I'm all set.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great job,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Thank you
You
so
can go
much,
home now.
Alex.
You can eat supper.
Or say
Watch
what?
us on TV, of course.
Great.
Next, we'll have Alan Gould, President, Chief Operating Officer of MRI, the firm we hired today and 5 years ago, actually, that for the search we have for that. What's his name?
I don't
Oh, yeah,
remember.
Peter.
The guy that left.
Guy that left.
Well, thank you.
How easily we forget.
It was a pleasure to work with the board, and particularly with the screening committee. Alex did a great job with the screening committee. They were great to work with on the couple of meetings we had together. Just to add that you had 40 total candidates that had applied for the position. 11 were from Massachusetts, which is really high for in-state candidates. I'm sorry, there were 27 from Massachusetts. They were candidates from 11 states. But the 27 from Mass is a really high number. We had cut through our resume review, our telephone interviews, our preliminary backgrounds, and our essay process. We had cut the field down to 13 candidates that we had submitted to the screening committee. They knocked it down to 5 that they interviewed, and then you have the 4 that they selected.
I think it was a great job.
Thank you.
That, we appreciate all the efforts you've done, and that hopefully we'll be impressed with all of your candidates tonight and select the best one. Thank you, Alan.
And the first candidate is here, so whenever you're ready.
Please, we're ready now.
Yeah, we're ready.
If not,
We're
we'll
rotating around on these? We're rotating around on these 5, right? Of these 5, we're just going to take turns? Makes sense? I don't care. I
Yeah,
just want to know when I'm supposed to speak and
I
not
don't
speak.
know. That sounds good to me.
Sure, hi.
This is Anthony Onsali.
Jack Wilhelm, hi. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, good to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you. Okay.
Have a seat. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you want to make some introductory comments? Tell us about yourself, et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank MRI. It was a great process, and I want to thank Alan. I also want to thank the screening committee for bringing me forward tonight as a finalist. One of the reasons why I believe that I'm a fit for Wenham, and looking at what you were looking for in your qualifications for an ideal candidate, I think that I matched up very well with that. My management experience for the past 15 years, I've been in municipal government on the management level, 12 and a half years working for the town of Brookline, handling the $25 million public safety budget, and then for the past 2.5 years for the town of Littleton, of which I served for the last 7 months as the interim town administrator. So I know that also a commitment is important to Wenham. It was probably about 3 years ago that I sat here looking for a different position, and back again, because I think Wenham is a great community.
It's the same position, I believe, no?
No,
No.
he was
No.
here for finance.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, Peter, that was 4 years ago.
okay.
Yeah.
That's why you look so familiar.
Yeah.
So hopefully that, my wife and I, we are looking to move out of the city from Malden to the North Shore. So, very well, this could be my last stop in my career. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Okey dokey.
Beautiful.
So we have some questions that we've been all coalescing around. So, Kathy,
May I start?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
So the first question that we have on our list is to please tell us about your understanding of this job as town administrator and what you think the challenges and the problems are, and why we should consider you in particular as the person that we choose for the position.
Sure. As the town administrator, similar to where I served as the interim, it's really the chief administrative officer, the Board of Selectmen, the chief executive officers of the community. I think Wenham has some some challenges, some of those being the fiscal challenges with the structural deficit that you're going into FY20. And with that, I think that there's some great opportunities, which makes this position very interesting because you have a new town manager in Hamilton, you'll have a new town administrator in Wenham, and a new superintendent. So that's a great opportunity for the three leaders to come together and get to some consensus on what can be sustainable for communities going forward, but yet still maintaining that excellent school system that the Hamilton Wenham School District does have. So that's I see that as a real challenge, and I love a challenge, and an opportunity, even with the Boulder Lane. I know that that's been on the radar screen, and that's a great opportunity to work with the City of Beverly as well as the various owners of the different parcels to see if some kind of development that would be acceptable to the town could go forward. So I think that with the housing issue, there's a lot of things going on, which I think that my experience in Littleton can really parlay right here into Wenham. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Anthony. John, you have number 2.
Are we going to go in necessarily the
No,
order?
you can ask anyone
Okay.
you want,
All right.
as long as it's number 2.
As
No,
long
I
as,
No, just anyone you
sure,
want.
you
Thank
didn't
you,
tell
sir.
me, he didn't tell me that.
I didn't restrict you to
No,
another
I
one.
thought I was, but was a good first one.
Yeah, it was.
All right, Anthony, you, a little bit vanilla, alluded towards the fiscal issues that the town of Wenham is in. So you apparently are aware that the town of Wenham is under very serious budgetary constraints and financial difficulties. How would you very specifically attempt to address and resolve these issues on a long-term basis? And what, in your experience specifically, have you done that would relate to the fact that we are in a very difficult situation these days? And I find it is probably the number one issue for the town of Wenham for some foreseeable future.
It is. With the enrollment,
Yes, sir.
with the enrollment shift, and in the last 5 years, adding $1 million to the Wenham budget, that's a lot for a community that 82% of your revenue comes from property taxes and really very little commercial. So again, what I mentioned earlier with the town manager of Hamilton and a new superintendent, I think it's the collaboration, really. I think that 6.9% growth that you had last year in the school budget, that's tough. We had that in Littleton, and we can hit that once, but it's not sustainable. So it has to be that you're working with the school department to, again, there's that balance between wanting an excellent school system and, being able to afford it. So, I know you have the override, so I think that's really first is diving in and making sure that the three leaders work together to see if we can come to a sustainable growth number. Other things that I did is, in working with Brookline during the recession periods, we had to look for different ways to still continue to deliver services, yet with less personnel and no growth in our budget. So what I did for both police and fire departments, I looked at all different levels. We looked at different lease options to reduce costs. We looked at different ways that we could redeploy staff and cut down on overtime costs. We had a hiring freeze, so we were really stretched thin. We invested in technology that was going to have a dividend and pay dividends. So an example with that would be we did an electronic records management system, so that initial capital outlay saved a lot of money on the other end with staff's time. So we were able to still with less staff, because through attrition, we did not backfill some of those positions, but we were able to provide that same level of service. So it's really digging deep into the organization to see how we can rely upon things like technology, renegotiating, similar to what you just did with the GIC, and saving $100,000 there. There's opportunities, and that's what I've done in Brookline. That's what I haven't had to deal with right now. We're in a good situation right now in Littleton, but that's what I can bring to Wenham. You know, my auditing experience, I think, really allows me to assess something really quickly and help come up with recommendations and solutions and ideas for ways to continue to deliver the same service.
Follow-up questions, John?
No,
Do you have a follow-up question?
No, I'll save anything for later.
Catherine, on this
I'm
question?
good for now.
On this question?
Thank you.
I'm good for now.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
My
you.
turn.
Good
I
response.
may come back.
Well, this is your chance on this question.
Well, I might come back. It depends
And
on
this
what
is your chance on this
You might
question.
say something else that reminds me of budgeting. Go ahead.
Please take a few minutes to tell, I got the shortest question because I'm the chairman here. Please take a few minutes to tell us why you should be the next town administrator.
Sure.
If you blame me with these questions, they were giving, the MRI gave us a draft of 39 questions.
I know.
We tried to pick the most benign ones that wouldn't piss anybody off, so.
You know, we
You had a
just,
couple minutes to think, that's why I gave you a couple minutes to think about it.
we just went, I'm trying to hire a finance director in Littleton, so I'm sat on the other end of that table and doing the same thing, so I know it can be challenging.
Want to
But
repeat the question?
no,
You think you can remember?
you know, I've been working really hard for the past 6 years or so. I realized that when I enrolled in the certificate, the MMA and the Suffolk University Certificate in Local Government Leadership and Management, it really led me to say, why not? You know, why not that direct, why not that, you know, at the time I was looking at two different options, a finance director position and maybe one day leading up to a town administrator position. So, but I knew that I wasn't going to get the opportunity to sit here tonight in front of you without continuing my education. So, after I finished that certificate program, I continued on at Suffolk University and got my master's in public administration, and it was one of the best experiences. It's something that I'm really proud of, because when you're working for any place, but in a municipality where we have night meetings and you're going to school for grad school and you're writing 20-page papers, it was challenging. And it really made me learn and prepare for this opportunity. 7 months, it was a wonderful learning experience in Littleton, being the interim town administrator. You know, you think you're ready for everything, and you have curveballs thrown at you every day, and fires to put out every day. So, you know, I met that challenge for the last 7 months without having an assistant. So I was basically the town administrator and the assistant town administrator, holding two hats. So not afraid to work. That's the ethic, my work ethic that I would bring here to Wenham. Roll up your sleeves, work, dive in with the team. Small community, we got to be ready to work together, and regardless of whatever it is that needs to be done. No job is too small for a town administrator, so, especially in a smaller community. So I think I'm ready to bring my experience here to Wenham.
Thank you.
Okay, right.
Follow-up questions on this question? On this question?
I hear you. I'm just looking at my
While you're thinking, John, do you have any
questions.
follow-up questions while she's thinking?
No,
Thinking's over, we'll go on to the next
No, okay,
question.
that's
And
fine.
you're up for the next question.
Okay, it's tough to choose. So from your experience and observation, and I'm going to make this a little more specific, but what is the single most important characteristic, do you think, for an effective town administrator in Wenham? In general, but particularly, you seem to know a lot about Wenham.
Something that, being a public servant, and it's something that I really hold high, you know, customer service is just, I think is just everything. I think being a good listener, being a good communicator, you know, not only with the Board of Selectmen, but with the almost 5,000 people that are here in Wenham. That's the approach that I've taken where I'm currently I'm at in Littleton, is that if somebody calls up and has a complaint, I go out there. You know, if it's a mailbox or if it's something even bigger than a mailbox, you know, I'll go out and I'll go with the DPW, we'll investigate what the situation is, we'll let them know that we're responsive to them, because it's a public service. That's what we do, is we provide a service to the public. And citizens want to know that there's somebody going to be at Town Hall on the other end of a phone that's going to answer their concerns and listen. Sometimes we can't help every citizen. We'd like to, but what I've seen in my experience, and just the fact that you're willing to listen and give somebody the time, they're very appreciative. And even though the answer at the end is, geez, we really can't help you out, they walk out with a smile on their face because their government's listening to them. So it's really important. Being transparent too, really important. I think more information we can get out to the community, the better. In Littleton, I started the Facebook and Twitter pages. We brought Steve Click Fix in. Everything possible to reach all different demographics in the community, because there is some people that will watch this, for instance, and there's others that will follow along with social media. So, you know, those are the characteristics that I think that are important for the next town administrator.
Follow?
Yeah, I actually do on this one. So appreciate your comments. And I'm not sure I thanked you for being here at the very beginning, but thank you. So you talked a lot about communication, how important it is, and certainly we would have to agree with that. A lot of communication that we do now is communication out, letting people know. Do you have any experiences or thoughts on something that's a little bit harder, and that is how to gather general community information in, so that we especially who have to make decisions over the town, have a better idea of what the folks out there are thinking and how they could communicate that in?
So that was part of the reason why we went with a Twitter and Facebook account to reach, to try to see what's out there, what the chatter is, and have an opportunity for people to be able to not only just feel like they have to walk into Town Hall to ask, but to put something out on Facebook and we'll respond. I sit there and monitor. It's always on my computer, and if somebody asks a question, I respond. So we try to do a lot of public outreach too, as far as we'll hold, we have what's called Third Thursday during the summer period that just started. Today actually would have been a night, but it's canceled. But what I did is in Littleton is I got one of those pop-up tents and said, we're going to be Town Hall and the park. So we brought some of the information that we had going on in town. We were trying to do a sewer project. We were trying to, we had a space needs issue where we're looking at possibly a renovating or a new town hall and a council on aging. So we went to the community, where the community was. So Thursday night, I got a couple of department heads and asked them if they'd come out with me, and they did, and they enjoyed it. And we went to where the people are. So we did that, and we've done that on a Saturday too. So it's worked out well. People really enjoyed seeing us outside of this building and in the community. So I think it's important to do that.
Great, thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, John?
Yeah, just kind of a more of a get outside of the four walls of this building. You made a comment about taking your jacket off and roll up your sleeves and getting into it. That has a lot to do with the culture and custom of a community. And each community does have a very different characteristic to it.
It does.
I don't see how you cannot really get into your job successfully here without getting outside of these four walls. I've seen predecessors that kind of did it, half did it. What example would you set for yourself to get outside of these four walls? Are there some institutions you would want to be part of, or ways of stepping outside the door?
No, I really mean community events and to reach out with the community. And yes, you're right, it does take a lot of time out, but, anybody that knows me, I'm usually the last one out at town hall sometime around 9 o'clock, because there is a price that you pay for that. When you leave and you're in the community, you're meeting with people at a community event, there's still work to be done. So I go back, and it's like I said, sometimes it's 9, 10 o'clock just to get some of the stuff I want done, and that's the type of commitment that I make. I think it's important to do that, to reach the community, and there's still work to be done, so you just can't go outside of these walls, and the work has to get done. So, I put in a lot of hours, and I'm not afraid to do so. It's, in this type of job that we have, my wife, God bless her, she's fantastic. She knows that she doesn't see me Monday through Thursday. She's usually in bed by the time I get home, and it's something that she's accepted, being a public servant. So she's proud of the work that I do, so that makes it easy for me, too. So
So she's very supportive.
she's very supportive. Oh, yes, she's very supportive.
Efforts and time.
But you moved to Connecticut.
Yeah, that's right.
Couldn't do it
Because it
without
can
a
be 7 days
supportive
a week.
spouse.
It absolutely
As a
can be.
selectman member, I was always told, before I ran the first time, 10, maybe 15 hours a week. Do it. Well, you can probably get the basics under your belt that way. You will never be successful
No.
at it, and
Yeah.
the community will not know who you are.
Right.
Or not see your responsiveness unless you're out there when it's needed, not when it's convenient.
She's so supportive. We've gone back on the weekends to, Council on Aging does a little satire once a year, and we went out, and she came with me. So she very much is part of the community, too, on the weekends. And we try to, make a day of it. So it's part of our life, and she really accepts that. And the community likes to see her, that there's somebody else. So it works out well.
You
Thank
get a
you.
couple extra hours with her, too,
That's right.
sort of.
That's right.
Yeah, I know about working full-time because I've been putting about 5 to 6 hours in for the last 6 days.
Yeah?
Especially in the minutes for 2 or 3 days with Catherine Tinsley, but nonetheless. So I have one other question on our list, but it's not on the list. I'm going to choose something that was it's a little more difficult, but you've been done a great job before, so.
With the easy
please
ones, so you're going to give them the hard ones now? Okay.
Please describe the most difficult experience you've had during your professional career. Looking back, would you have handled it differently, and what did you learn from this experience? How have you grown as a result of this experience? And that, you can think about this if you want, because it's not the usual,
Yeah,
easy one.
Well, I tell you, I think the most difficult experience was probably recently when our town administrator left a little earlier than we were expecting him to leave, and he retired. And really been working so hard to get to that position. I was just going gung-ho and going to put in for that position. It didn't work out. And I think what I failed to do is to really have that communication with the Board of Selectmen individually to see what exactly they were looking for. So our town administrator was a 40-year municipal government. I call him a municipal legend, so, and when you have somebody for a long period of time, like a Wayne Marquis in Danvers, that.
Good example.
Yeah, when it's time to have somebody new, even though that they appreciated having that type of experience, that they were looking to see what else is out there. And when you're an assistant and he hired you, there is that, well, we're going to get the same old, same old. So, it's, so again, if I had that conversation and knew that they were looking for outside, I wouldn't have put in, because it just ended up creating controversy, because I had great community support. I had seniors in town writing letters on my behalf. I had businesses writing letters on my behalf. And the selectmen got inundated. So, in the end, if I knew, eventually I did pull out of Littleton because I realized after that they wanted that change, which is fine. It's understandable. But I knew that the community needed to start healing and recognizing that they were going to have another town administrator. So I, made it clear to all of my great supporters out there that it's not going to be me, and we're going to work together. We're going to prepare over how many months it's going to be before the next town administrator to be here to get to that point. I didn't know it was going to be 7 months, of course. So, but that's what it was. So I think I could have had that conversation with each selectman individually, just to see where they are. So again, the communication. I think anytime we run into an issue, it always kind of comes back to communication. And as much as I preach the importance of communication, I think I missed the boat on that one. So it was a learning lesson for me.
Very interesting answer. So, Catherine, you have any follow-up questions for any of the questions we've asked, or that one, or want to throw another one out there? But
well-
we're going to wind up this round, though.
Well, we have,
Prepared questions.
okay.
Before
so
we get to other
you
questions.
just want follow-ups on the prepared questions. Well, there is one more
Go
prepared
ahead.
question. Can we throw it in there? It's probably one you get all the time. In most communities, but it will be telling, I think. In most communities, there's a vocal minority that can impact operations and potentially the morale of departments or individual employees. And that's a community or an employee, I guess. How do you deal with the vocal minority?
I just thought we just had that. Is it everywhere?
It's just
there is a couple of, I like to think there's two groups in Littleton, and the approach that I took was I wanted to get to know each group, and I wanted them to get to know me. I wanted to show them respect, and then in return, I got respect. So I was really successful in doing that, and really reaching out to them, that we had a great working relationship. So there's still issues that they brought to the table, but I could have some of those conversations with them, and they respected the answers that it kind of subsided. So I think the approach to take in ignoring a group is not going to be productive. That's not what I found to be productive. It was engaging. And trying to help them understand why some of the decisions that are being made. So it's worked for me in that situation. I know every situation is different, and every group is different, but that's the approach I took.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any follow-up questions, John? Yes.
No, just more of a comment. I really appreciate your answer to that question for Catherine, because I have seen all too many times when the answer to the question or the solution to a problem is not a straight line. And you have to take different approaches to it. So hearing your concern or thought process of communication and reaching out and asking, and sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 times in different ways, eventually you will be successful in surfacing it.
It's worked. I have an open door policy, and they'll come in, and sometimes, like I said, they just vent, and we work on it, and I try to help them see different sides to every issue, and it really does work.
Yeah, but the communication, you're right.
Yeah, it's
I believe
so
you're very
important.
correct, is so critical. But if it was a straight line from point A to point B, from question to answer, problem to solution, we'd all be out of jobs pretty quick.
Oh, no question. And that goes with
That'd be good for a
citizens.
month, though, John, wouldn't it?
It sure would be a nice
Yeah.
relief.
Yeah. And that works even in staff with department. That's the approach I take with my department heads, and that's why they're very supportive of me, so
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So now we're going to move, we have a few minutes left. I'm going to ask Catherine to focus on his resume and the information we received. It's in your package.
Okay.
And that-
Yeah.
Right, this stuff
Yeah,
right here.
yeah,
And that anything in there that you'd like him to elaborate on or a question.
yeah, I do have a question, and it is somewhat related, although it's not exactly to a line. I have a few of those too, but it's really important, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, that to the people in Wenham and to us, that there's follow-through and detail orientation, and you also talked about communication. That being said, as you probably know, multitasking is, not even the right word. So my question is, with the myriad of issues that may be short-term or projects that may be long-term that are going to be on the town administrator's desk, how do you keep track of them, prioritize them, and make sure that they all get follow-through and the communication, which includes the communication?
Sure. There's, I go in the office and I have a game plan on how I want to address things.
Sure.
And, half an hour in, that's out the window,
Sure.
Because always issues come up. But what I do is I have monthly department meetings with the department heads. Also, what I do is have weekly meetings, and sometimes it's driving in on the way to work and talking to my DPW director as he's driving in and discussing, what about this project? What about this? What about this? So, or I'll go down to, I like to leave my office and meet them in their locations, and sometimes in my office, but, I want them to feel comfortable. So I constantly meet with them. I have a checklist. I use Microsoft Office, so I have my tasks calendar going, my task listed, and I use my calendar to make sure that we don't fall behind on anything, and that little reminder notices that, okay, we need a sewer meeting and so forth. So I really lay it out, because if I didn't, it's, and if you miss it, I just move it over to a couple days, But, I always have that, that's, the calendars works well for me to keep track of everything and to make sure that nothing goes astray. Sometimes it just, we may put something on the back burner because something else, it just is a more important issue at the time, but it's still always it's always on my desktop.
Okay, thank you.
John?
I'll say.
So I'm going to give you a chance to ask us questions.
What would you like to see in your town administrator? What's the most important characteristics you think that the citizens of Wenham, yourselves, would be the ideal candidate? I know that's what the statement said, but if you had anything else.
Okay. Lots of things, and that somebody who's in charge, somebody on top of all the problems. I mean, all this is vanilla stuff. I'm not going to tell you anything that's enlightening to you. Being in touch with the issues in the community, certainly working very well with the board.
Could be helpful, John.
Being responsive to issues that the board presents to you for you to solve. And being able to communicate. We usually meet twice a month, and during the budget season more often than that, but basically giving a pretty comprehensive report on what you've done in the interim, and in terms of the goals and objectives that the board has laid out for you in the year, and what goals and objectives were recently on your to-do list to do. And apprising us of issues that have come up since the previous board meeting, whether it's a lawsuit or something from the state or a grant that we've applied for or a grant we're going to apply for, basically keeping us informed of the major developments in town and how you're addressing them, and that what type of guidance you look from the board to you to solve a particular problem. And that I'm going to turn it over to John and Catherine to see if they had to augment that or disagree or have a different opinion.
Is that, can I follow a question to you?
No. Sure.
When he says no, he always means yes.
Is that?
He loves to stick it in
Are
just a
you
little
done?
bit.
Are you done?
I can take it, I'm all right, I can take it.
Of course, go ahead.
The communicate, is that through email? Is that how you've communicated with Peter in the past, or is it
No,
via
when all
phone?
three of us get together most of the time, one or more of us will meet with Peter once a week for a brief meeting, or once every
Okay.
other week. But no, I'm talking about when we come together as a Board of Selectmen, where you're going to advise all three of us
Right.
about what's going on, grants, the budget, meetings, things that are important, particularly questions that we've asked you to follow up on from the previous meeting. That's what I'm really referring to.
Okay.
It's collectively, we're all three hear the same thing from you as opposed to one-on-one. But
Right.
obviously, all free to meet with you weekly or more often on.
That's great.
To get a particular take on something.
That's great.
Hey, not me, you?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to,
Well, while you're figuring it out, you want me to, I just have a short?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
To augment Jack, actually, because I agree with everything he said, which
That's good.
just is good for now. But there are two things that come to mind. Integrity. It sounds silly, but
Yes, please.
integrity is really important in everything that our town is administered does. And the ability, and I've used this phrase before, but the ability to get to yes, to deal with people or issues or disparate situations that might occur within the community, within town hall, between us, and to figure out a way to work with whatever and get to yes, in a way that, not everybody's completely happy, but no one goes off mad. I think that's a lot of what the challenges are for the town administrator.
Yeah, it's, an integrity as far as being part of the ICMA and the MMA, we had a code of ethics. And even my experience while I was, working for the state, for the Department of Revenue, we had a strict code of conduct and an ethics. And it's something that I hold very high. I live by that every day. It's everything. The integrity, my integrity just means everything to me. So it's an important, in getting to yes, I'm the type of person where, I always don't like to say, well, just no. I always think that, yeah, we could do something. Let's talk about this, talk this through. So I always believe something's possible, and how can we work together to get to yes? Because it's really working together. It's a team. We're a team. The town employees, we're all a team, and we have to work together. No one person can really solve everything, but a team, a powerful team, can get a lot of things done.
Right. Thank you.
Anthony, thank you. We're running out of time. Do you have any last comments for the three of us from the
I do
upper
have one last follow-up that you said you'd come back to me on.
I did?
You did?
He did.
It's too late, John.
Real quick.
No.
No, your predecessor, when Peter came in here,
Yes.
I pulled him aside and I strongly recommended that the most important job he was going to have was to take the morale that was horrible in this building and in most of our departments because of prior issues that went on, and work to fix that. It probably took him a good year or more to fix that problem. A lot of it has to do with things like Catherine was saying about integrity and transparency and honesty and so forth. Yours is going to be different. Yours is going to be very mechanical. As I said earlier, I think the most important issue right now is our financial
No question.
obligations and circumstances. But that also takes into consideration morale. I want to fully appraise you that you've got almost a two-sided process to deal with here. Your question was, what would I like to see in a
Right.
town administrator? I want to see performance in keeping that morale up, because we do have a very, very good team here now. But at the same time,
Get through it,
fixing
right.
financial problems can be extremely painful.
Yeah, it really can be.
Been through it personally, business-wise, and it's
Yeah, being an auditor, I have great experience with that, and, and knowing that probably the most important asset that the town has is the people that work for it.
That's right.
So, what I,
Don't put new widgets on digits.
now, so what I do is
Write
just,
that down, John, that was a good one.
that was, I may use that. But just for
Christine, you can make sure you
one of
get
the things
that
that I
down,
do, because I realize the importance of morale, just opening day, we had a opening day lunch where we actually barbecued out in the back of Town Hall. We had burgers, dogs. We got together, we watched the ring ceremony. Everybody got coverage, everybody felt great, and then we went back to work. So I, periodically, I think that, I do those type of things, and you have an ice cream party in Littleton, just to get the employees to let them know that, I know that we're busy and we have a ton of projects going on, and we're a small community too, but you're valued and you're part of the team, and we can have fun together. So there is that balance, and I think that that's really important.
And no job is too minuscule.
And you have any last concluding comments for
Thanks,
us?
Jack.
You're welcome, John.
And
No, just thank you very much. It's great to see the three of you again, and hopefully you'll see that my qualifications will meet your needs.
You did very well.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
good your name
Thank
isn't
you.
John.
I know.
We've had too many Johns
I
here.
saw that
Or
during one of the
Catherine.
meetings. There was a
And you're
little
not
confusion,
Catherine
right?
Well, it's certainly not a Catherine, that's for
Not
sure.
Or Catherine, we have two of those.
Unless they-
Start
In
painting
a total
numbers on our
disguise.
forehead or something.
That's right.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much
much.
for coming in.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you, good to see you.
I'm gonna grab a water if you don't
Oh,
mind.
please, that's why they're there.
It's $1.10.
I'll put it in the box up front.
Well, the time flew in that one, that we started and that,
So how much time do we have with each?
45 minutes.
Okay. So we're actually,
That
In
was
good shape.
43 minutes.
but-
is here whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
40, that was.
well, we
44
didn't start
minutes.
right at 6, though.
5:59 we started, I wrote it down.
Okay,
That's
I
my
wrote
job.
down 6:03. That's
Well,
good.
that's
4
when we
minutes
started
one way
paying
or
attention.
another.
He's the clock master.
You ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Michael. Hello. Michael Rosen.
And this is
Good evening. How nice to see you.
6:44.
Michael, John Clemente.
How are you?
Same.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Jack. Good to meet you.
My pleasure.
Hi, nice to see you.
The opportunity. Good to see you again.
Have a seat in the witness chair right there.
Right in the firing squad.
Yep. It's perfectly hooked up electronically, so
Yeah.
we can shot collar you anytime we need to.
Well, it's early yet. Let's see.
So we're going to begin, you know the three of us, our names anyway, and that while you're here, obviously. And so you have any introductory comments that you'd like to share with us about your candidacy?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me tonight. And actually, I know you from watching some YouTube videos of you all.
Oh,
so
great.
I've seen
Terrific.
you in your best. And so I just wanted to
We're
start
always
with
at our
that.
best.
Yes. Also watching town meeting. That was interesting. So we'll get into that.
Oh, yeah.
So my name is Michael Rosen. I'm the assistant town manager in Bedford, Massachusetts. Bedford being not too far away from here. Sandwiched between Lexington and Concord, birthplace of the Revolution. We're very proud of it. I've been there for just over 3.5 years as the assistant town manager. Prior to that, I was in Greenwich, Connecticut as the executive assistant to the first selectman for 3.5 years. It's a little bit different form of government in Greenwich. They had a 3-member board of selectmen, so that's very relevant to tonight's interview. They were partisanly elected, though, so that's slightly different. So I'll take you.
What does that mean?
They were Republican, Democrat, or
Yeah, by
independent.
party.
Oh, I see.
So they were actually
One of
elected
the
by a
first
caucus.
questions you were asked, like I was asked
Yeah.
when I ran for office, are you a Republican or Democrat?
Doesn't matter.
Didn't know there was an
Yeah.
affiliation.
Not,
Thank
you know
goodness.
what? And same thing with managers. We're completely nonpartisan. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through my life a little bit since you asked me so nicely. So I'm originally from New York City. I know I talk fast, so I'm trying to actively slow it down.
I get it.
I'm from Queens, and so I'm not a Yankee fan. I'm a Mets fan.
Yes.
And I
Another
want...
good thing.
Oh,
As well.
Notice you didn't say
Well,
red.
that's one strike. Go ahead.
sorry for 86, but you guys have had how many championships since? So come on.
1 or 2.
Oh, I think 4. So I just wanted to kind of say I grew up in New York. We don't have local government really in New York. You have the mayor. You don't really think about the departments when you're a kid growing up in New York. So how the heck did I end up in this industry? I went to upstate New York for my bachelor's. I have a bachelor's in philosophy, politics, and law, which is actually, even though it's sounds like a cool major. It was heavy government, heavy history, heavy writing experience, English, very relevant to all that, and a little bit of human resources. So when I left undergrad, I decided to try my hand at the private sector. I went to Manhattan, I went back home, and I worked in private sector human resources, executive recruiting for 3 years. And I found that it was very interesting because human resources is a people business, government's a people business. It kind of matches nicely. So I decided to go for my MPA rather than an MBA. And I went to Rockefeller College at University of Albany. But when I went there for my master's degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a specialization. Some of my friends went to Homeland Security. Some of my friends went into working for the state, working for the Division of the Budget. And I decided to try an internship in Schenectady County, New York as the intern at the county manager's office. And holy smokes, it hit me that this was what I was meant to do. So from then on out, I was all local government classes. I had an excellent mentor and a professor that was a Schenectady County manager for 30 years and took me under his wing, showed me the ropes and said, you got to go out for your first public sector job. And it was a very nice transition right from grad school. I graduated. I went right to Greenwich, Connecticut. I didn't know anybody there. I picked up my life and moved there. I did that again when I went to Bedford. So I'm somebody that is mobile. I can go where the job is and where I'm needed to go and where it makes sense for my next step in my career. And that's what brings me here tonight. I'm ready for that next step in my career. I'm selectively looking. In fact, I think this is the only position I have cooking at the moment. So, I mean, that says a lot for Wenham. I think Wenham is an excellent fit. I'm ready to be a town administrator or town manager, but I know in this case, town administrator. I've had experience with working with 3-member boards, so I understand the open meeting law nuances of working with a 3-member board and sort of being the meniscus between you all. I'm ready and prepared and willing to do that and to take your policy and enact it and make it digestible for the public. So I'm trying to think if I really missed anything. That's pretty much, I have a standard career track. I'm also here with the complete support and encouragement of both my current town manager in Bedford as well as the retired town manager in Bedford, who, by the way, was the manager there for 30 years. So that's somebody with crazy tenure in any one particular municipality. You don't see that anymore these days.
Right, that's
Wow, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah,
And did
thank
speak
you.
fast.
Thank you for giving me a
I speak
chance.
faster than that, so if we can.
It's
John,
the
let's
New
begin with
York.
you. We have some questions
Sure.
that were
Sure.
prepared questions that they're pretty easy. But anyway, I'm sure you'll knock them out of the park.
Thank you.
All right. How aware are you that the town of Wenham is under a very serious budgetary and financial constraint set of circumstances? And how would you plan to address this problem? So are you aware of it? How would you address this problem? And work to resolve it? Resolve it. I don't mean patch it.
Yeah.
I mean resolve it.
Okay.
So that long-term, it would be taken care of, and we would have learned a lesson as to how to avoid that situation in the future. And what experience have you had that would convince the board that you can actually understand the problem, and then how would it relate to what we're dealing with here, and do you know that?
So, multifaceted question.
Yes.
I was not aware. No, I'm just kidding. I've actually done a lot of research on your situation. I've actually spoken to a few of your current staff, and I did speak to Mr. Lombardi as well to kind of get an understanding and a lay of the land of what's going on here. And so that, as well as looking into your GFOA budget from last year and into your financial reports, it screams that this is the breaking point year. And I know we're in fiscal 20, it looks like we're going to be doing an operating override for the town side. I know we've had 2 overrides for the school side the last 2 years. Obviously, doing overrides is not a sustainable thing. It's not a financially wise thing to do that, but you have to make ends meet. And for that circumstance, for those past few years, that's the reality. Now, my caveat here is that I probably won't have all the answers for you tonight, because that's something that once you get into the role, you understand the nuances, and once you immerse yourself in the community and meet with all the key players and talk to the finance committee and talk to through with the selectmen, you're going to start to understand what those nuances are and where you can really make a difference. So, but I'll give you sort of a broad strokes of what I think the scenario is here, and perhaps how to start looking at it. So, you are a community that has over 80% of your revenue comes from your residential base. You have a very low, if minimal commercial base, and that's you like that. That's part of your identity, and it's a small town, and there aren't really opportunities at the moment based on the current zoning that you would have opportunities for big mixed-use developments. Now, perhaps down the line, that's something we could look at in particular parcels that might become available in the future, but at the moment, the reality is you're a residence-driven tax base. I think that you've done a really good job, and I don't know who to pat on the back for this, whether it's Peter or the selectmen or just the department
Probably
heads.
the selectmen,
Yeah,
Since
the
you're here,
staff.
and,
But
Your second guess was
I would say the selectmen.
Yeah, good choice.
Regionalization, a lot of regional efforts, that is great. I mean, you're reducing your head count where you can, where it makes sense to. You're streamlining services. You're making sure that residents still get the same level of service that they become accustomed to, doing more with less. We all wear many hats in our jobs. Even a community like Bedford, which we do have a commercial tax base that's enviable, we still all have to pitch in and do whatever is need to be done and doing more with less. So I think that looking at regional efforts that you've already engaged in and seeing if those are all favorable for Wenham specifically, and perhaps not so much for Hamilton. I mean, I don't know. I know that the school enrollment has shifted in favor of Hamilton recently, and that might come back the other way. I know that I was looking at I think it was the town visioning report, and it talked about how population here has potentially hit its peak and is starting to come back down, so that maybe there won't be as many kids in the school system going forward, so perhaps that ratio will swing back in favor of Wenham in the future, but that's not a given. Nothing's a given. So you can only get your ducks in a row that you have control over. So if you're looking at new regional initiatives, maybe you're starting to think about properties that might come up that are either privately owned at the moment or they're publicly owned, and perhaps you can reutilize them into some other sort of, I know I'm trying to speak in generic here, but I think that if I may, be so bold, there's a college in town.
You haven't lived here for 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that there's a college in town, and perhaps down the line, if things are different in that college, maybe that's an opportunity for mixed-use development. Maybe we can swing the commercial base that way. So there's also, I saw there was opportunity for, cell towers in town. I know that's something that all needs public input, though. You can't just top down. You have to ask and get the buy-in from the public to see if these are things that are favorable and there's an appetite for these things. You can't just make unilateral decisions. So I think that in order to start to look at resolving your structural deficit, you need some of the groundwork's already been laid. You've got the regional efforts that you've already engaged with, looking at what else could be regionalized in the future due to either retirements or staff transitions and attrition. Just sort of getting that paperwork done and research done ahead of time so that when the time comes and that department head retires, you might be able to talk about how to merge with another community. I think another really good thing that Wenham has engaged in is a regional IT with Danvers, Topsfield, Hamilton. I spoke with I think you put Manchester by the Seas in that too. I spoke with the manager of Hamilton, and I spoke with the town administrator of Manchester by the Sea, and I saw them at a conference a few weeks ago, and they've said that they've enjoyed working with Wenham specifically. It's things they want to keep meeting with whoever the new town administrator is to keep up these relationships. I think there's a lot of transparency and trust building that needs to go into the next town administrator taking this role. So did I cover all your aspects of that question, John? I'm just trying.
So
Okay, just keep on regionalizing where you can. Keep on
cover territory quickly.
Yeah, you got to think
good
creatively.
to talk
Let's I'll wrap it up with a nice.
I follow you, Ray.
Think creatively. Think where things can be done differently. Be collaborative. Work with your partners and your neighbors, and make sure you're a good. Make sure you have public buy-in to all these things, because at the end of the day, that they're the ones that are going to be voting on it, and if it fails, then
You can have the greatest idea in the world if you can't sell it.
yeah. And I think you need
no
to
value.
you need to do your due diligence. You have to make your tour of all the public boards and committees before you get to town meetings, so you don't all of a sudden find out that there's a big issue.
But there are only so many times that you can shut the lights out and think you're going to substantially affect your budget issues.
Right. This is the breaking point here.
There's- Right, there's got to be a much broader view on how these expenses are occurring, and the 800-pound elephant in the room is the schools.
Sure. And you need
Do
to.
you understand how a regional school system works.
John, you're in your
Massachusetts.
second question now, so.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
okay.
I can answer that later if we come back to it then.
No, go ahead, answer it now.
Just-
John won't have his third question. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jack. Yeah, no, Bedford does engage in a regional school district with Billerica, Tewksbury. It's called Shawshene Technical
Yes.
School. So we do have a regional school. We do have our own Bedford school system as well. It's a 4-school system, but then high school age children can decide to go to Shawshene Tech for their high school. So I know that obviously there's staff turnover right now in the school department. You have a new superintendent, you have a new business manager. I think there might have been some turnover recently on the school board as well, the school committee. So you have an opportunity now for people that are new, and the new town administrator of Wenham as well, to sort of start getting together, build that relationship, build the trust, talk about ideas. I mean, if everyone's coming from outside and not internal, then you're going to have a whole slew of new ideas that might be exchanged at meetings. And I could perhaps bring some things that I know about the Shawshene Technical School System with me to this position. The other thing, too, I didn't quite cover last time around was that you want to increase your revenues where you can as well, not just try to decrease your expenditures. So if there's an opportunity to look at fees or permit, or anything like that, how's our trash contract doing? How's our insurance? I know we just got out of the GIC, and that's been a relatively interesting. I talked to Patty about that and what that's kind of yielded after that happened. But, how's your collective bargaining contracts? Are they too high for the area? You got to do your benchmarking and make sure that you're not too far outside where you should be. And this is something that I've learned from a town manager I work for. When it comes to fees and anything like that, you don't want to be the person that's charging the most for a fee. You don't want to be the person that's charging the least for the fee. You want to be somewhere in the middle. So I want to find out where Wenham is on that spectrum. And is there an opportunity that we can have some local receipts and not just, always be looking at the denominator, but try to look at the numerator as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Captain.
Okay, backing up to something a little more general. You've told us a bit, but please tell us a little bit more about your understanding of this job as town administrator and what you think the challenges and problems are and why we should consider you as the candidate that we choose.
Okay, that's a great question. So I've heard,
Thought so.
Someone did somewhere.
So I think, to be funny, I think that the town administrator is your chief problem solver. I think it's the person that everything either bubbles up or boils down to. You are the chief administrative officer, and the main job of the town administrator is to enact the Board of Selectmen's policy and also be a person who's immersed into the community as a secondary face to the selectmen, somebody who's going to be going to the community events. Like I know Saturday there's an event, and that happens to be the same day that Bedford is having a Summer Solstice Festival. Otherwise, maybe I would have showed up. But be at the events. You want to be able to interact with the public and make sure that they're being informed of everything. You're the person that day to day you're overseeing the departments, and now it's a little bit different here because some of your department heads are elected, and you have departments that report to independently elected boards. So it's sort of a dotted line reporting structure, but you still have to interact well with everybody and be, copacetic. So I think that the town administrator has a big role to fill here, and I know Pete did a great job when he was here. Having spoken with him, he said to me he's relied heavily on his staff while he was here. The staff is fantastic. There's a lot of staff with really good tenure. There's also staff that has recently turned over, and looking forward, there's staff that will be succession planning for, and that's a big part of what the town administrator is going to be looking at as well, is about how do we fill this institutional knowledge that's going to be leaving. We have to document what everybody knows and make sure that the next town administrator comes in and hits the ground running, and the next, same thing with the department heads when they leave. I know it's a very small, tight-knit group of people in this building, and Peter told me it's only 12 people in this building, so it's very small. And you're a liaison to everybody as the town administrator. And I'm somebody who is a people person. You probably can see I'm affable, and people approach me, and I'm always happy to interact with any residents that come over to me or board members. I staff 4 committees at the moment, and I also go to other meetings just because I'm interested in finance and I'm interested in housing and other. I'm trying to think of community preservation, which I know you also are part of community preservation program, and you contribute the maximum 3%. So there's a lot of good similarities here, and I do think that I would be somebody that would interact well with you all as well. I actually had some points that I just kind of wanted to cover, but I don't want to dip into any other questions. But
We'll get to that later.
Yeah, okay.
Right
so
now
why
it's
don't
our turn to ask you some questions.
Yeah, no, I would happily answer your next question, but I was going to say I have some thoughts that I had for.
Why don't you save that till we get...
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Because I want to make sure we get our questions in.
Yeah.
So my turn.
Yep.
It's a real easy one.
Are you sure? Let me check. Oh, yeah, okay, it is your turn.
I'm glad you talk fast because you get a lot of information in that. Please describe the most difficult experience you have had during your professional career. Looking back, would you handle it differently? What did you learn from this experience, and how would you have grown as a result of this experience?
Okay.
I'm glad I didn't. No one's asking me this question, but
Yeah,
it's
really, I would want to
it's
answer.
a little toughy.
Okay, I do have. I'm gonna focus on one answer to this question. Although when you ask a question like that, your brain races to try to think what really is the most complex problem you've solved. And I could say it was, a project I've worked on or a grant I tracked down and had to deal with all the red tape from State Department or whatever, Mass DOT or MBTA. But I got to say, my most difficult experience that I triumphed and walked away with a good understanding was Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy in 2012, when I was in the town of Greenwich, that was like my third or fourth week on the job, and it decimated our coastal line. And I, as the executive assistant to the first selectman during Hurricane Sandy, my role became the public information officer for the whole town. So I slept in the EOC for 3 nights on a Red Cross cot. I was woken up by 2 in the morning by a bugle call by the police chief who thought he was being funny, but he was, I had to put out a press release in the middle of the night for anybody who was looking. We did hazard mitigation. We were looking at, I was in the room when there were fires that broke out and they couldn't put them out because the winds were too strong. So I think that professionally, that was an experience that really showed me what we do, how it matters, and how the public safety personnel that are in our organizations interact and, snap to it in the moment. And like everything else goes out the window. You're no longer union and management. You're working together to try to solve a problem. No one's caring about the overtime. Yeah, you're tracking your hours to try to get it reimbursed later, but it's all about making sure that people are safe and that that issue is resolved. And it was a good experience for me, but in the way that it was a bad event. But having been the public information officer, answering phone calls from people saying that there were issues going on, there were floods coming in, how do I get out of here? How do I go to a safe area? We had opened up, the Red Cross came through town and opened up shelters. It was callbacks to Hurricane Katrina. We opened up shelters. But if you look at the geography, Greenwich was really impacted by Hurricane Sandy. And that, I have to say, that was the most difficult experience. And what I did learn from it was how to be very effective in an emergency and how to make sure that people were well informed, even in the middle of the night, and how to get information out about keeping safe, about down power wires are considered live. Don't go anywhere near them. Don't put on generators anywhere near your house because of carbon monoxide. So you just sort of pick up these things having been in a situation like that. So I think that's my answer to that, Jack.
Yeah, one part of the question was, looking back, how would you have handled it differently?
Well, I would have said no hurricane if I could, but
Okay, God.
No, I think it was difficult, but you kind of have to do with what you have. It was an opportunity to learn, but in the most inopportune time. I do feel that only thing I would have done differently was make sure that, I'm just trying to remember it. I was working more closely with the emergency operations director than the first selectman during that time, and I think the only thing that I would do differently would be to keep my actual boss more in the loop about things. He wasn't in the building with me at 2 in the morning. I was there by myself and with police staff and fire staff and health department staff. But I probably would have kept more informed with the first selectman, because when you're in a state of emergency, you just have to put information out and not check it over necessarily with your boss to make sure that it was, every I was dotted and T was crossed. But I do feel like, I did what I had to do in the moment, and I never, it wasn't an issue. I probably would have kept him better in the loop during that. And I certainly would do so here. If anything ever happened in Wenham, what I've learned from that is I would make sure to keep all of you in the loop immediately. And I just saw in the news there was a barn fire a couple months ago in March, and that's something that if the media is going to call you to ask you questions about it and say what happened here, I want you to be prepared and informed and have a standard message that you can reply to them with, that all the facts and not be caught off guard and say, what fire? I had no idea. Because then your next phone call would be to me and say, what the heck's going on here? So
true.
that's what I think.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Catherine?
I think this is a follow-up. But I'm not sure it was this question or the one before. But
Whatever, go ahead.
I think it's a follow-up. So you talked about your understanding of a town administrator, and I'm looking at your experience, at least most recent experience. I'll tell you, I'm from Long Island myself. It's the first time I've been able to admit that I'm a Mets fan, so I'm going to try to make it out of the building. But aside from that, Bedford's a bigger, I know, like I said, Bedford is a pretty big place compared to Wenham, and a town manager has a different job than a town administrator. Can you speak to particularly what you see as the differences between a town manager and a town administrator?
Sure. I think just very simply it boils down to where your jurisdiction ends. I think for a town manager, you have more authority without having to ask for permission, whereas a town administrator is somebody who's going to look to guidance from the elected officials, specifically the selectmen, but also to perhaps other elected officials for guidance and how to enact their policy. And if I can offer this, Catherine, I'm somebody that at this point in my career, I would actually welcome that guidance because I know this is my first shot at being a town administrator. I've acted as a town manager for for 5 months, but specifically for 2 months as an interim. And I'm ready to hit the ground running, but I'm going to need some support and help to understand where you're all at and what your thinking is. So I think that town managers can they have more direct reports. They have people that they directly oversee and don't have to ask board support or board permission to talk to or discipline or whatever it might be, whereas a town administrator is going to be more collaborative and bringing people into the fold. And maybe you don't have as much authority on paper, but at the end of the day, your job isn't necessarily to make those kind of decisions. It's to check in with the board to make sure that they are ready to make a decision like that. I think, and also Bedford is about 15,000 population. Greenwich was about 60,000 population. So I have gone smaller before, and I'm not afraid to do that. And I think it's an opportunity to really get to know the community. 5,000 people might not sound like a lot of people to somebody coming from a 15 or 60,000 population, but I watched town meeting. You have a good turnout to town meeting. I think that it's really, town meeting is the greatest show on earth, and it's free to go there and so.
That's right, there's no entry fee. Well, you do have to pay your property
Like a
taxes.
circus sometimes.
John, you were going to ask a question too before I let you, till you have to.
Do I need to ask a question, or can I
No, go ahead.
just go as a follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up, go
I
ahead.
liked Catherine's
Whichever one you
question
want.
very much,
Oh, thank you, John.
because a few years
He told me
back,
he was going to say that.
I know.
I really had to spend some time fully understanding and appreciating what the difference is between a town administrator and a town manager, because there was a push to put this town into a town manager type position. That said, how conflicted are you going to be, would you be, dealing more as a subordinate as opposed to the boss? Is that going to cause you some conflict? Because I've been both, not town manager or administrator, but in my work positions, I'm both top dog and second in command.
I think so. Even a town manager has to check in with the selectmen or to the council regularly, because you can't go too far off the reservation or you're going to get scolded. But I do agree that there's, it's a charter or it's articles of incorporation issue where, where does your line of where does your purview end? And a TA ends sooner than a TM. And I can be honest with you, John, that I have no qualms about being a town administrator. And as I said to Catherine and to you all, that I understand this is my first opportunity to be the top dog, so to speak, but to turn around and take your guidance and to make it digestible and actually measurable to the public, that's something that I'm enthused about doing. I don't think I'm not somebody who's vain, and I'm not somebody who needs the credit. I'd rather do the work and make sure that it gets done in a timely fashion, and to make sure that my job is to make you look good. And my old boss had a sign on his desk that said, "There's no limit a manager can reach so long as he or she doesn't mind who gets the credit." I swear by that. You should get the glory in the limelight. You're the elected officials. You're the ones who are in your seats because you make campaign promises. My job is to make sure that those promises get enacted, but also to make sure that the goals that you give me are measurable and attainable. I expect that if I get this job, we'd sit down as a group and have a retreat somewhere and do a goal setting session. I want to find out how often and I can communicate with you and how to communicate with you and how often you want me in the public, which I'm great. I do that as much as you want. So I'm on board 100% with being a town administrator.
That was a good response, because every year, one of these positions could be a different person. Not everybody comes to the table with the same leadership and management qualifications. I truly enjoy working with my two counterparts. We all bring something different to the table. We all bring something different to the table, but we all have the same end goal in mind, and that is we're here to do the work in the best interest of the town of Wenham as a whole. It's not, my opinion doesn't matter. I may have one, and I'll share it with you, but so that conflict could be quite a variable annually.
I would hope that this board stays in place for a long time. I know you've been the same board that hired Peter, but should that ever transition, I would be hopefully the person who maintains the stability and sustains the relationship and trains the next selectmen, and with the support of the other two, whoever that might be, that we would sit down and go over that person's goals. Since I'm right there with you.
Thank you.
Sure.
By the way, the short answer to John's question about the difference between a town administrator and a town manager is our sister town, Hamilton, is a town manager. He is the CEO of the town. The CEO of this town are the 3 Board of Selectmen. In that. So I'm going to turf it over to Catherine for a follow-up question.
I don't have any more.
Or a new one.
Okay.
Or anyone.
Or anyone. Wow, I have to decide. Time's short, which one I
Goodness,
want
'cause
to
I have
ask.
to write this down. Catherine Harrison was out of words.
No, I have so many words, I have to decide which one to choose. I have to prioritize my words. So I guess I'll ask one that I've asked before, but as you probably can imagine, the job of a town, well, let me make a quick comment first. I think what you find in Wenham is that, as Jack and John have said, the town administrator is sort of the chief operating officer, but and probably at the beginning, as it probably was with all of our town administrators, there was less authority. And as time went on, and as that individual person proves themselves, they're still, the Board of Selectmen. But from an operational point of view, I think I find that if our town administrators prove themselves to be competent, take on themselves, and we are comfortable with them taking on more. That was just a comment. My question is actually,
The leash gets longer.
the leash gets, well, yeah, I mean,
In dog terms.
we're not micromanagers, So anyway, in the job of town administrator, an incredible amount of multitasking and an incredible number of projects, issues, day-to-day things that come up. And it's really important to us that all of those things are followed through and are done in as timely a fashion as possible, and the communication is clear. We appreciate the fact of your communication to us, of course, but to all stakeholders. So my question there is, how would you keep track, or how do you keep track of the different priorities and the projects and the status of them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question in the sense that you are giving the town administrator the opportunity to sort of manage his or her own daily affairs. And you said you're not a micromanaging board. But at the same time, I do think that you probably have to at least give some guidance as to what the town's priorities are. So you're focusing the town administrator on those areas that you've deemed to be the highest importance. That's the purpose of a goal setting session, quarterly updates, and making sure that when you get to the end of the year, you can hold the manager or the administrator accountable to reaching those goals. So I think that on a day-to-day basis, when you're not necessarily in the office with me or the town administrator. That's up to me to make sure I carve out enough time that I'm able to do all of the different aspects of the position. You want to do collective bargaining, you want to be able to get the paychecks out on time and the packets out on time and the agendas posted. There's a lot of nuts and bolts. Meanwhile, you're taking phone calls from the public. I think managing your Outlook calendar is very useful. Sometimes there just isn't enough hours in the day and you just have to stay late and work weekends. I have no disillusion that this is a 40-hour-a-week job. I know that this is a full-time, you're always on type of, you're always representing and beating the drum of the town. So I think that, like I said, you're always accountable, you're always on, and you can manage your day-to-day. You ask staff for support, but make sure that you're not overburdening them as well, because they have their own tasks that I believe that department heads are subject matter experts in their fields, and you empower them, you have their backs, you listen to them, and you hold them accountable. That's what a permissive style of management is. So I find that I'm very good at multitasking. I learned that when I was in recruiting, because you're doing different jobs and you have different candidates calling and it can be hectic. And the same is true for both of my municipal positions I've had so far. I've had to switch gears. I've had my day planned out, and I've had somebody walk in or call me, and that changes the whole crux of my day. You have to reorient yourself, and you still have to get everything done on time. You have to get that agenda posted by law. So I find that I've risen to the occasion, and I am a good multitasker. I use technology where it's pertinent to help me with multitasking. In general, I like what I do, so I don't find it a burden to be working late or working long hours or going to committee meetings or being in the public. So I find time for everything.
I've got that recorded, by the way, in case we should go further with this.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm going to ask you for any concluding remarks you'd like to make to the board.
Sure. So thank you so much again for having me. I know this is probably a daunting decision to make, and I know at least one of the other candidates, the gentleman who was here before, and I think everyone here is probably very qualified to do this job. It's about fit, and I feel like who's going to be the right person to move the needle of Wenham forward in the next however many years. I am somebody who can make a longer term commitment. I thought to myself, I was in Greenwich for the 375th anniversary. I know it's asking a lot, but would it be fun to be here for the 400th anniversary? That's a long time from now, but you never know.
Well, I won't be here.
But
We would love it if our town administrator was.
That's
25 years would be.
That's a long time.
Oh, yeah,
But
that's right.
I have a boss that did it though,
I don't
for
think
their,
so.
but I do think Wenham's a very nice town. I've spent some time here today before coming to this interview. I'm just trying to wrap it up quickly, but I did go to the tea house. I did go to the museum. I went to the library. It's a beautiful town. It rallies around your small town feel, your equestrian history. I really appreciated being at the museum. Just as a case in point, Bedford rallies around the Bedford flag and the Bedford Minutemen and the Revolutionary history. Greenwich, beautiful historic beaches that people flock to in the summers. Wenham has a very nice small town feel as well, and you have that historic character and charm driving around here, the older homes, which is hard to find. I'm somebody that I appreciate housing, and I think, and I'm also a person who likes history. So I see a lot of good similarities between the positions I've held and also in Wenham. And I just wanted to conclude with this, that one of the things that I thought of, not just why is this job a good fit for me and why am I a good fit for this town, but also would I work well with this particular Board of Selectmen, since you're the ones that have this decision to hire the next town administrator. And I think from what I've seen, I like that you all have a sense of humor. I think we would jive well together as the board.
You kind of need to, right?
I like that you're also fiscally conservative. I budget the same way. And I just think in general we would have a good rapport if I was your next town administrator. So that's all I have. I know, sorry if kind of wrapped it up like that.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Sure.
And, you did a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Very much.
Very nice to meet you, John.
Never seen anybody could cover so much territory clearly and cleanly as you have.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd hope to do it again. Nice to meet you, Jack. Thank you for the time.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the opportunity. Let's go Mets. Okay.
Yeah, really, go Mets. But be careful.
Be
Really,
careful,
if you
you're on
end up
camera.
working here, you're going to get trouble if you say that too loudly.
5-minute break between the two meetings.
Okay,
Right now?
Yeah.
5-minute
Fine with
recess?
me.
Yeah, we're going
Like now?
to
Okay.
take a 5-minute break between candidates. Call it a
Perfect.
recess, call it what
I
you
can
wish.
drink a glass of wine that fast.
Well, okay. Okay, you can roll it again.
Oh, I guess I should sit down, huh?
Okay, we're back from our 4.5-minute recess, and that we're here to welcome the next candidate,
Christine Lindbergh.
Christine Lindbergh.
Christine, welcome to Wenham.
Another
Thank you very much.
Another
Good to meet you.
familiar face.
Wilhelm, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Christine, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Nice to see you as well, thank you. Hi.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And that we begin by letting you introduce yourself and give whatever opening and introductory remarks you so choose.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Christine Lindbergh, and I have over 20 years of experience in municipal government. And that started with my volunteer work as an elected member of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board in the town of Middleton. And through to my current position now as the Director of Human Resources for the town of Dracut. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from Salem State and a master's degree in public administration from Suffolk University. I love my job in local government. I have a passion for public service and local government. And it's something that I believe over the last 20 years of both my volunteer work and my elected positions now to the jobs that I've had in different organizations. I've got a lot of skills, experience, and education that I think would make me a really productive and effective town administrator here in the town of Wenham.
Very good, thank you. So we have some sample questions that were prepared for us, and that I'm going to let Catherine begin because I let John begin last time.
Oh,
I already
fair's
forgot.
fair, I
Sure.
guess.
So,
Whatever.
can you please take a few moments to tell us about your understanding of what this job, particularly in Wenham, is, and what you think the challenges and problems are, and why we should consider you in particular to be the next town administrator?
Well, as you know, I was a selectman myself. I've sat on the other side of that table. I've interviewed for
God bless you.
town administrator. So, I understand the dynamic between the people who volunteer their time and their talents to their local government and the administration that you're looking for. I think it's important that there be that good communication between the boards and the staff, so that you can be on the same page as to what your policy goals are, and convey that so that we in the administration side can facilitate those goals. So I think it's important that the town administrator have a really good understanding of the town and the people and what their hopes and dreams are for their government, and to be able to work with their team to achieve those goals.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to take the next question. I got the easiest one in the group. Let's see here. That's a joke. If I can't find the next
We know we
person.
have to spoon feed you, Jack.
If I
So.
can't find the next.
Catherine, if I may, you did
Yeah.
ask what I think, what one of the challenges,
Yeah.
one of the challenges are. I mean, clearly, you have some issues with your budget. That is something that we addressed in the submittals that were requested of us.
Here we go.
You have the structural deficit in your budget, the enrollment shift with the regional school district, and you've got an increasing tax rate because you are pretty much 100% residential. So any of these costs that are driving, the main drivers of these cost increases are borne on the backs of the taxpayers. I think one of the biggest issues that you're going to have to address is bringing in some economic development to the town. I know that a lot of people move here because they love the open space, they love the bucolic nature, the beauty of the town, but the cost increases to operate a town, to operate a school district, it's not sustainable unless you have something you can balance with the residential tax base. And that's going to be a difficult question to conversation to have with the community, because I know that it's something that you're not used to, you don't have currently, But the reality is that it's something that has to be addressed. So thank you for allowing me to clarify that.
That's okay. Thank you.
Well, let me explain to the viewing audience that by bringing in economic development means that we can actually tax twice the residential tax rate for any commercial enterprise. And obviously, there's no children going to school, which is why it's a double win if you can get some commercial tax base in the one. If you were in Boston, it might be 4 times the residential tax rate, but generally in the suburbs, it's 2. So here's my question. I'm glad I don't have to answer this myself if you're asking me. Anyway, please describe the most difficult experience you have had during your professional career. Looking back, would you handle it differently? What did you learn from this experience, and how have you grown as a result of this experience?
I mean, both in my elected positions and in my jobs,
Yes.
there's always been difficult conversations that I've had to have, especially working over the last 6 years in human resources,
Sure.
in personnel management. Those are very difficult conversations to have
Sure.
with your staff. I think that it's important that, everybody understand that we are public servants, that customer service is the most important aspect of our jobs. And when we have an employee who is either not meeting expectations or is acting in a way that is not conducive to our organization, we have to have those difficult conversations. Both in an elected position also. You're in a small town. You have your friends and neighbors who are before you on the board. You have to make decisions that they are not always going to be happy with. I think one of the biggest challenges I had when I was on the planning board was when we needed to, allocate some zoning for, I believe it was, adult entertainment. That was the one. That was probably the most contentious vote that I had to oversee, and I was the chair of the board at the time. Again, you're not always going to make everyone happy, but our job is to do the best possible job that we can for the residents. And sometimes people don't understand exactly why you're voting the way that you are, but it's important to have that integrity and have people trust that you're doing the best job you can.
So part of the question was, looking back, how would you have handled it differently?
I think that the communication is always the most important aspect of any relationship, be it with the electorate, be it with your employees. I think that understanding...
I am going, thank you. Excuse me
Sorry,
one second.
we have a technological issue.
I thought
And don't come back.
we took credit for solving that problem
was
last year,
just
John.
Distracting us, sorry.
I was going to pull out my 45, but I said, no, that'll upset everybody.
Why don't you begin all over again?
No.
Sorry about that interruption.
That's okay.
But it
No,
was
that's
disturbing to watch, and I'm sure from her standpoint as well. Please continue.
So I think that it's important to always communicate what your goals are, what your objectives are. Sometimes we think that we're communicating effectively, and maybe that is not the case, and that is sometimes the cause of unrest or, people not feeling like they're getting the results that they had anticipated. So I think that we always try to learn from those experiences. I was successful in the adult zoning, so that was good, but there were some bumps along the road, and I think that, again, we learned lessons about being better communicators with the public.
What was the outcome of that, by the way?
We were successful in establishing that overlay zone for the adult entertainment.
Was that a vote of the town, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Was that the vote? Was there a vote of the town, or was that a decision?
Resolve.
Yes, the
So it went to the town,
Yes.
so they can. Okay, and so the majority of the town supported that. Is that
Yes,
right?
they did.
Okay, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I won't take what I know is going to be John's question. From your...
He'll take yours. You can take
No, it's
his.
okay.
I got other thoughts, too.
And she talked about it a little anyway, but from your experience and observation, what is the single most important characteristic for a town administrator, do you think? Trait, characteristic?
Sure. Definitely you want to have somebody that's a good leader, that's a good manager. And in order to be a good leader or a good manager, you have to have integrity, credibility. People are not going to follow you if they don't believe in you, they don't believe in your mission. I think that it's important that you, again, be able to communicate with your staff so that you can make sure that everyone understands the goals and objectives that you want to achieve and your expectations of their performance and how that will help us be successful in achieving those goals.
Okay, thank you.
John?
I'm going to kind of follow up on a prior question, and that is, I'm familiar with Drake. It's a charming little town. I spent a lot of time up there when I was very young. Haven't been there in many years.
Glad he's.
But it is also bounded by some rather rough sections of other communities.
Yes.
How do you see a connection to Wenham? Because we don't quite have that same.
Sure. Well, as you know, I've lived in the
Dynamic.
North Shore now for about 25 years, and most of my experience has been in small towns. So, between Hamilton and Salisbury, Middleton
Hamilton, that's
also.
right,
Drake is by far the largest community that I've worked in.
What is the population size of Drake?
It's over 30,000.
Oh, geez, it's much bigger than I thought. Okay.
And also, area-wise, it's very large.
Geography,
So
yeah.
there's still a number, there's a large section of the town that still has a lot of farms and open space. And then there's the more densely populated areas that are near, like the Lowell border.
Lowell, Lawrence, yep.
Be it a big town, be it a small town, all the cities and towns have the same, challenges that they have to face. And we're all required to provide the same, types of services. It's just on different scale due to the size of your community. I kind of equate this more to, Middleton and the type of the makeup of the citizenry, and people move to Middleton. They also like the open space, and they like to see Richardson's cows grazing on Route 114. And so we worked very hard over the last 20 years to really balance the influx of all the new homes that we've had, and that means
Unbridled over in Middleton.
and the children that are going to the school system, which was we had a structural deficit one year because of an enrollment shift. So, but we worked very closely to make sure that we drove that economic development in a way that still helped us to retain that open space and that suburban quality, but also bring in the tax revenue that we would need to, help us to provide the level of services that the electorate required.
Thank you.
Back to you again, Catherine.
Can I go off script for a minute?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Something.
Talk about the Red Sox?
No, I'm definitely not going to.
Finally.
No, it's actually a very specific question about something that was in your cover letter.
Sure.
And I ask it because I'm trying to understand a little bit more about your level of experience with some things. So in your cover letter, you talk about, of course, the fact that you're Director of Human Resources, but it also says, which intrigued me, that your responsibilities include overseeing special projects assigned by the town manager.
Yes.
Can you give me a couple examples of what those special projects might be?
Sure. One of them that I most recently completed was they instituted a mobile 311 that they were using. Primarily now we started with the DPW. So we were looking at efficiency of operations, the way that they were handling, distributing their workforce throughout the town. Again, it's a geographically large town. So it was the pen and paper, here's a work order, go out and complete this task. When they were completed, they would come back to the DPW garage and here's your next work order. So the mobile 311 is going to allow us to have a more mobile workforce. So they'll have tablets. The work orders will be uploaded to the tablets. They'll be assigned to the different work crews who are stationed throughout the town. Once they've completed that work assignment, they will go onto their tablet, indicate that they've completed, and if there's another work assignment that's in that close proximity, they will be given that next work assignment and they can go right there, rather than having them have to, go back and get more equipment or things like that. So it was going to, make us more efficient, make us more productive, and it also allows then the other component of that. There's an app that you can put on your website, so and you can assign it to all different types of functions. You can say, report a pothole, report a street light out.
See, click, fix.
It's kind of
Like
like a
that?
see-click fix,
Yeah.
but it allows you not only on to report it,
Right.
it also allows us then to
Control your,
disperse our
Yeah,
work crews
resources
in a much more efficient and productive manner.
And what was your exact role in that?
So we had contracted with this place called Dude Solutions, which I love the
Yeah.
name of that. And so my job was to assist the DPW with getting that up and running, because they had some longtime employees who were very, very good at their DPW jobs, but were not so much computer savvy. And so I kind of assisted them with making sure that they understood how to operate that, how to use it, any issues that they ran into. We had a number of DPW employees that didn't have email addresses, so that had to be facilitated so that they could put into the system. So things like that.
so you help them get comfortable with the technology, which is intimidating to many of us.
Right. So
My kids still scream at me, "I've told you this 3 times."
Yeah, and if you don't use it all the time, it
That's
can be a
right.
little intimidating. So, I would go over and I would help them, and if they had a problem, we'd work on it together. We started to assign dummy kind of work orders throughout the staff, and then we are now on target, I believe, for like mid-July. We're actually going to upload the app to the website and start out small with a few minor things like a pothole, the street lights and stuff. And then you can do, animals that need to be removed from the road. You can do a tree down, a fence, a mailbox, all kinds of different
Well,
things.
I can see what you're saying, and that's very innovative of your operation. I assume you took a lead role in this,
Yes.
because dispatching can be very chaotic if you don't have the communication going on, and then going on correctly.
Yeah, it helps us to be more productive, because this way we're not, coming back to the yard every single time that we need another work order. These can all be dispensed now electronically.
Great, thank you.
So I have a couple of questions in your resume. Who was the town manager in Hamilton when you were there from 2009 to 2012? Refresh my memory.
It started out as Candy Wheeler was the town administrator.
Oh, yes.
Yep. And then Michael Lombardo came on board.
So you spent both of those.
Yes.
Did you leave shortly after he arrived? Is that-
A couple of years after he was there, yeah. I was there during the entire change of government, when they went from a 3-member board to a 5,
Yeah.
from
that's-
a town administrator form of government to a town manager form of government.
We remember.
Yes. Susan Wilczak.
We lived through it as neighbors.
Yes.
So in the town of Salisbury, you described your title as chief aide to the town manager. Were there other aides, or where were you in the managerial hierarchy? Chief aide is a descriptive term, but not usually a title of a particular position. So that, and I've read again the 6 or 7 or 9 bullet points. So was this assistant like the assistant town manager, or? I'm reading what your duties were, but I still want to pinpoint what a chief aide does in relation to the town manager, him or herself, or the other people in town.
Sure. In essence, it was an assistant town manager position, but the manager, Neil Harrington, used to be the mayor of Salem.
Correct.
So mayors like to call their seconds chief aides.
aides, yeah.
That just seems
He's a
to be...
good man to work with.
He's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time in Salisbury very much. So yes, I was the first person who really ever had that role. And same thing, I was there to do not only the personnel side, but to also assist in special projects. And special projects, I researched and got them up and running towards buying their streetlights back. There was a sewer project that they're now finally getting off the ground, but we worked very hard on that, sewering a part of town that had not previously been sewered. During my time there, they built a new library, they built a new police station. I would attend all those meetings. We were part of the the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Association, the MVRTA, and so I would attend all those board meetings on the town manager's behalf.
Sounds like an interesting job. Nice place to work, too, no, Salisbury?
Yes, it was, and wonderful people, and I, like I said, I did enjoy my job there, and I did a lot of many different things there. I would do all the workers' comp, the 111F. I did all the health insurance, both for the employees and the retirees. I did the general liability insurance. I insured all the motor vehicles. I insured all the town buildings. So there was a number of different responsibilities within that job. But it was a smaller community, so you could handle all of those things. In Drake, because it's a much larger community, I'm more concentrated on personnel management, collective bargaining, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yeah, Salem lost a good person when they lost Neil.
And
I got to
Salisbury
know him
gained a
quite
great
well.
thing.
Yeah.
Right, it was to their benefit, and you've obviously appreciated it, so.
Very much.
You've had a great opportunity.
Don, do you have any concluding questions?
Yes, the key component to my concerns for the town of Wenham is our financial deficit
Yes.
and difficulties. Are you aware that there's a tax cap in the Commonwealth of Mass?
Yes.
And if so, do you know what that is?
I believe it's $25.
Correct.
That's
And
pretty dang-
how do we successfully get beyond that? Because I heard you say, well, bring in some commercial industrial. Well, I've been born and worked in Beverly forever. They have a great deal of industrial commercial property. There's going to be a struggle there pretty soon, because if you don't control your spending, all the money you make can be out the door. So how do you change that in a community like this, where even to consider certain changes of development are going to be very difficult to do and long-term?
Right. I mean, just in the financial documents that I reviewed, I've seen that the costs for the school district have increased. Since 2016, I think it's like 1.4 million.
49% over the past 5 years.
Yeah. So that definitely is something that needs to be addressed.
So how do you get the lasso around that character?
Yeah. So it's always about finding that balance, right? So you know that you're going to need to have a commercial tax base to take some of the burden off of the residents. But that's not going to happen overnight, and that's going to be a slow process. So you have to really, I know that you're trying to work on a master plan also. Mm-hmm. Having those visioning sessions, getting the public to come out, and again, that's a slow process, because not everybody's going to come out. Not everybody's going to take the time to weigh in. But you try to get as much feedback as you possibly can and ask the town, what is it that you're looking for? Try to drive any kind of commercial base based upon what you know that you can get approved at town meeting. So listening to, residents, we don't want increased traffic. Okay, so you probably don't want, some type of retail establishment. But you can always get a commercial base in here that is, doesn't put a huge burden on municipal services, and also won't create, increased traffic, because that's always something that residents, are not in favor of. At the same time, really coming to terms with what's going on at the schools and how we can control some of those spendings, some of the cost and spending. The number one driver in any budget is your personnel and your benefits. And those are things that you can control. But again, it's not always an easy path. So it's a constant communication, and getting that buy-in from the community to take some of those tough steps.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Concluding questions, Catherine?
I don't have any right now.
Okay. Do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to share with us?
Well, as I said, this is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. I really enjoy my job. I enjoy all of the experience and education that I've gotten through all of my positions that I've held. I know that our job as government employees is to provide the best possible services in the most fiscally responsible manner. And I think that my experience, my education, and just all the different things that I've done throughout my career as a town administrator in a small town like this, you really need to have someone who understands multiple facets of government management. And I feel that I have the experience, and I think I would be a great fit for the community, and I would really look forward to the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming tonight, and that we wish you well. and
Thank you
that,
so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good job.
Great to meet you, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Pleasure, thank you.
Nice to see
Good
you.
job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see you again.
As well, thank you. Good luck to you.
She's gonna get Harry's phone.
Have a great night.
Thank
too.
you.
Didn't hear that, but
No,
Sorry
that
about
won't
the
say
ant
louder.
interruption.
That's okay.
You're running ahead.
but she doesn't vote.
Oh,
So
right.
I think you're about 15 minutes ahead. So
Okay.
I'll call Leon, see where he is, but he was scheduled to be here at 8.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think you didn't spend a lot of, that last one I think was short.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
we got our questions answered.
Yes, you did.
and her answers were shorter.
They were.
Yeah.
You know, actually, she's
So we're
the
gonna-
second or third person who basically said that, I know people like the bucolic residential character of our town, but we're paying a price for it, too.
Well, that's right.
Do we want to take a recess?
Yeah, let's take a recess. We're in recess right now.
Hi, Leon, nice to see you. Look who snuck in while you were in the men's room.
I was out there calling you.
You got to get with the program, Alan.
Leon, right there,
Right there.
Yeah.
with a microphone.
We let him in. Since we were,
Disregard the phone call.
Well, welcome, Leon. and
Thank you for
that,
having me.
We're pleased that you were able to come tonight and be a finalist in this process. And we'd like to begin with allowing you to make whatever introductory comments you'd like about yourself and your candidacy.
Sure. So again, thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to be back here again. I'm currently serving in the State Department for the United States. I'm a Foreign Service Officer. So I flew up from Washington, D.C., where I am temporarily. Currently posted permanently in Monterrey, Mexico. Prior to that, I was in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Why am I applying for town administrator jobs? A couple of years into my diplomatic career, I've moved 5 times in 2 years with a 2-year-old. Well, now 2-year-old. It was a long
Does he
time.
speak Spanish, by the way?
He speaks,
Probably.
he speaks Spanish. I speak Spanish. My wife speaks Spanish. We've all, you know, growing up in our rural town in New Hampshire, it was always my dream to get out and see the world. I got out and I saw the world, and I realized that I think I'm better suited to be in the local government. I like the hands-on aspect of that. I want to establish roots. I want my family to have roots. And as much of an honor it has been serving my country, I think serving in a town form of government is going to be far more satisfying at the end of my career. So that's why I'm here this evening. I hope that answers any doubts or questions you may have about that. I'm certainly,
No, I actually answered some of them, but why did you choose to go into the Foreign Service? I know you told me why you're leaving it, but why did you
Sure.
choose to go into it when you're in a governmental, municipal position?
so it's a very, very long process to get in. I started applying, frankly, 9 years ago. And my most recent candidacy was several years after that. It's like I said, a long process, multiple steps. There's written exams, oral exams, extensive background investigations in order for you to get your top secret clearance, all of which takes a number of years. That was all prior to me having a child, me becoming town manager in Salem, and then you get put on a hiring list. And when they come to your name on the hiring list based on merit, that's when they hire you. So all of those things took years. And when I applied, I probably would have always wondered what if. So I got the opportunity. I talked to the board in Salem, and I said, I've got this opportunity. I know I told you guys I wanted to stay here, and they wanted me to be there. I had to take it. It was something that I would always wonder what if. So I did it. Okay.
But continue with whatever comments you'd like to make.
So I guess, in closing for this part of it, I'm now satisfied that local government's where I belong. Like I said, I want to put down roots. I don't want to move anytime soon, and I certainly think I have something to contribute to local government in a way that maybe I couldn't do in a large bureaucracy like the State Department.
Mm-hmm. Where do you live right now?
In Washington, D.C.
Okay, Washington mentioned that. Catherine?
You got me to start, okay. Well, coming as a town manager previously as a town manager in New Hampshire, can you tell us a little bit about what your understanding is of this job, a town administrator in a small town in Massachusetts, and what you think our challenges and problems might be, and why, in particular, we should consider you out of a field of a few people?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something I considered myself as I was applying for this job. I wanted to make sure it was the right fit. So, town manager in New Hampshire has, as laid out in the town code, has quite a few executive powers, but still works very cooperatively with the Board of Selectmen. I had hiring and firing powers there, but at the end of the day, it's a very collaborative, like I said, relationship. Small town, town administrator in Massachusetts, I understand, has a few less specific authorities, I guess I would say. Is going to more of a supervisory role or an intermediary role between the department heads and the Board of Selectmen. Certainly going to probably be more hands-on here because there's a smaller staff. I had department heads and many people working below those department heads in Salem. We had 215 full-time employees on the town side there in Salem. Wenham has many less than that. I think that's one of the interesting things about the position, though. The ability to get back to basics, to be able to do the things that I really liked about being in local government, engaging with citizens and committees and Board of Selectmen to solve problems. Wenham's, I think, a great community. It's the only reason I applied for it is because it's a place that I would want to live. I'm in temporary housing right now in Washington, D.C., so if I were fortunate enough to be offered this position, I would be looking at moving to Wenham or one of the surrounding communities because I'm not a big fan of commuting, and again, I want to be ingrained in whatever community I'm working in. I understand that Wenham has a couple of challenges going on right now, finances being one of them, the so-called structural deficit that you're working on.
Well known for that.
Something that, I was very much involved in the finances in Salem. We ran a very lean budget there, too. I think that's something I could work together with the community on to solve that challenge. Another issue that Wenham is facing, like many other communities, is demographic shift, making sure that there's housing options for the aging population and for for younger folks to be able to move into town with families. You have a great school district, which is attractive. But if there's, if there are not housing opportunities, you can't make that happen. And you want to be able to have the diverse mix of folks in town, because that's good for everybody. And I guess tied to revenue is, where does the town want to be in 10, 15, 20 years as far as development goes? In the town, I know there's been discussion about having a master plan done. That's something I worked on in Keene, New Hampshire, something I worked on in Salem, and that could really provide a roadmap as to where the town wants to go in the future, so that whatever decisions the board's making, the various boards are making, are in line with the vision of the community. Because again, you don't want to get out in front of the community if it's doing things that they don't want. And the town administrator certainly doesn't want to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. So you're thinking about moving from one swamp to another. Wenham is 80% swampland.
But that's literal.
That's right.
I am so thankful to see the rain. I've been living in Mexico. It's been a desert. So
Well, that's a good, you've had diversity, to say the least. Anyway, so how aware are you of the town of that the town of Wenham is under such very serious budgetary and financial constraints? And how would you plan to address this problem and to resolve it? And I don't mean Band-Aid, resolve it long-term. And what experience in your work world would relate to demonstrating to the board that you could actually accomplish this task?
In my research into Wenham, this time and last time, I've been impressed with the collaboration that you have, the cooperation you have with other municipalities to basically find efficiencies. I think that's a great step in the right direction. Small towns can't all afford to have specialized people doing every job, and by sharing positions and sharing services, that's a great way of starting. I think I would explore other opportunities for that, for one. Second, there are certain costs that go up faster than inflation. Healthcare is one of them. And in Salem, we were able to take a look at our healthcare costs, which were increasing 15, 16% per year, and make some pretty substantial changes, creatively though, working with the unions to switch from traditional point-of-service plans to high-deductible plans coupled with health savings accounts that were funded by the town, so that the employees didn't see a whole lot of difference. Same network, same doctors, same services, slightly different form of payment. We saw over $500,000 worth of premium savings that we're able to use towards other expenses. It also, having the HSA account, made the employees more aware of their expenditures for healthcare, because HSAs, they belong to the employee. They are an account that will actually convert to an IRA type account upon hitting the certain age requirements. So in the employees' minds, we educated them that every dollar they spent was something that was coming out of their potential retirement pot later. So you start becoming a more informed consumer as well. And that was able to actually change some of our experience, healthcare experience, our costs, basically. And what that did was make it so that our rate increases came down. And I expect over time that will become even more demonstrated. And this is not reinventing the wheel. Other communities have done this. But it's something that should be explored, could be explored, because healthcare costs are definitely one of those things that's growing up faster than inflation. So if you can start controlling some of those costs that are going up faster than the new growth, faster than your levy is increasing, then you can bring things into control. Again, I would explore other opportunities too. It takes a little bit of getting to know the community, working with various folks to understand what sacrifices you're perhaps willing to make, because there are costs and there are benefits. And I can, as a town administrator, I can lay out the menu of options to you, but the community is the one that needs to choose whether or not those options are feasible to them.
And the employees.
The employees as well.
With that.
Exactly.
Because it's a shared responsibility, but it can be a very painful.
And it needs to be a collaborative process. You know, and I've never found that I'm very good at not being just forthright with people. So when I'm working with the employees, this is the pot of money we have. Let's figure out a way to divvy it up. This is the challenge we're faced. Let's figure out a way of solving it. That's how I work. I found the most success doing it that way. I think you know, hiding information, it isn't the way to do business in my book.
Thank you.
So I'll take the next one. By the way, Mexico City was built on a swamp. My history tells me that. And secondly, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal almost identical to what you just described about health insurance yesterday, basically showing empowering the employees and trying to save money, not quite the way you described it, but in a similar fashion. So I think that's a big deal. You know, years ago, you didn't have an $8,000 family deductible and $50 to $75 copay in each visit, which is costing a lot of money. So I get to ask you the easiest question of the whole group, but I'm sure you're going to handle this very well. Please describe the most difficult experience you have had during your professional career. Looking back, would you have handled it differently? And what did you learn from this experience?
Wow, this is a good question. Difficult experience during my professional career. I guess I've had several. You know, being town government administrator or manager, there are a number of challenges that you face, and I think you learn from each of them. In Salem, we had a particularly difficult situation where one of our employees, a trusted employee, long-term employee, was arrested on a, I've said this a couple times, on a Friday. Everything bad happens on Fridays. And so I get the phone call from the chief of police that our longtime trusted employee's been arrested, that it's going to be in the news, and how do I go about dealing with that? So calls are made, the Board of Selectmen convene a special meeting, the person has to get put on administrative leave, and we start working through the process. The press is calling, I'm making statements to the press, we're doing further investigations, we're giving this person their due process rights. I'm also working through the process of determining whether or not that employee can continue. And this went on for a period of time. The public was quite concerned because the type of crime was a violation of the public trust. This person had control of finances in town. It was very, this is all in the newspaper, by the way, so I'm not giving away any personnel information. And this was a person that I really liked, that I'd worked with for several years, that I knew her family. I had had a good relationship with that person. And so that's difficult when you're working through that kind of situation. And we ended up having to part ways with that employee at the end of the process. And one of the things we learned at the end was that that person also had a whole lot of institutional knowledge that wasn't really recorded anywhere. And how do you go about figuring that out as well? And luckily we had a capable deputy working together with the deputy. I was able to step in and we put things together, and the office continued to function and things got done. But it was a little bit painful, and I guess I learned that you shouldn't rely on one person that could,
That holds all the keys.
That holds all the keys, exactly. That knows where everything is hidden. That knows how everything works. Even if that person is very capable, you could have this situation. That person could some other unexpected event could happen, and so it's very important to build in backups in local government. And that was a learning experience for me, for the community. But we figured it out. We took the opportunity. We hired a great new person for that role, who's still there, by the way, and thriving in that position. I think that...
and it's a shared responsibility now.
And now it's a shared responsibility. We were able to shift some of those responsibilities off to the deputy, make sure that there is much more collaboration, and and make sure that the town manager's involved in a lot more of those day-to-day matters, just as a basic knowledge, not doing the things, but knowing how they're done and what is done is just really important. I'll never be the expert at a lot of this stuff.
No, but that's an excellent, I think Jack's question is good, a great one, and it's an excellent example of
it's a learning experience.
What you went through.
And it was tough, and but that's again what you have to do as a town manager. You get the glory of presenting a great project, and then you have to do these other things that are less pleasant, and you hope that you're doing many more pleasant things than less pleasant things at the end of the day.
I had a similar experience, except the person wasn't arrested, but he was cooking the books, and that by millions of dollars, and that he had the keys to everything, as you just said, and that I was new on the scene, and that had to fire him, and everybody loved him, and I did too. Nice guy, but had to go.
I should say that just to dot the i's and cross the t's, we conducted a full audit after that person had left.
Sure.
And there was nothing amiss. So as far as the town side went, we were in good position. It was, but
Difficult, right.
difficult situation nonetheless.
But what you learned is you can't have one person control all the keys, like you just said.
That's right.
That was your
Me?
turn.
So I think a significant part of the job of a town administrator, particularly in a town that has 3 selectmen, and I say that as opposed to 5, open meeting law, a significant amount of the job is sort of the care and feeding of selectmen and communication, et cetera, et cetera. How do you imagine your overall relationship would be, and how would you relate to the Board of Selectmen in Wenham, do you think?
So I guess I've been working my way down throughout my career. So in Keene we had...
It's not easier to go down, believe me.
we had a 15-member council, which was on the large side. So that was a challenge in and of itself. When you have that many people and opinions, and because you're trying to treat everyone equally, you want to make sure that everyone has access to the same information, the access to the same advice. And as assistant city attorney, I think I always provided that service. But it takes more to learn all those different personalities. In Salem, we had the 5-member Board of Selectmen. Again, I tried to establish a relationship with each of the board members so that I knew their style, they knew my style. Again, you're not playing favorites. You want to make sure that they all have access to the same information. And like you said, the challenges with open meeting and things like that are a 5-member board can have the same problems. I actually used to teach classes on 91A, which is New Hampshire's open meeting law. I'm familiar with Massachusetts as well. So I think that's something I'm comfortable helping with, guiding, especially as new technology comes along. I had to help the selectmen in Salem that when they're sending text messages to one another, if it were about a town matter, that those things could potentially become public records. You don't think about that. That's not really intuitive. But I certainly wouldn't want to have to hand over my iPhone to have someone search it so that they could.
Do the Tom Brady thing. I smashed it.
Exactly. So I think it's the town administrator's role to stay on top of those things, and I think in a helpful fashion, guide the board to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. For a 3-member board, I suspect the dynamic is a little different. Especially an active board like this one, you all take your role seriously. You have a lot of responsibility, and I think my job is really just to help you make sure that you're doing the best job that you can do.
Okay, works. Thank you.
John, do you have any concluding questions?
No, I think you've covered it quite well. I would make the simple comment that the first time I met Mayor Kim Driscoll was many years ago at a common program we were at, and in the conversation, I got after her kind of humorously, or the intent was that I'm tired of you stealing our employees. She said, "What are you talking about?" Well, she had taken about 3 people from our finance department over the course of a few years. So if you were to come with us, I get to send her a note and say, "You got your upcomings."
I'm not sure over to Catherine in a second for concluding questions, but I do have a question. Let's say that this board unanimously, or majority of us anyway, but probably unanimously, chose you amongst the 4 applicants, and we offered you the position, you accepted it. How much time would you have to give to the federal government for a goodbye notice?
There's no specified requirement, but I think 30 days would be appropriate given my role. And the fact that I'm moving,
Well, at least 30 days, sure.
yeah.
I thought you would say something longer than that, okay.
No, it would be a 30-day notice. I've met what they call my time in service requirement at this point, so I can sort of de-enlist from them, if you will.
De-enlist, okay.
We get it.
I'm a commissioned officer of the Foreign Service, so
Oh, that's right, you're somewhat militaristic.
we have a
Yeah.
militaristic sort of hierarchy.
Yes, that's right.
And we have service commitments and things like that that are very similar to the military. So 30-day notice would be the minimum that I could do.
Sure.
Again, I'm moving my family from Mexico for all intents and purposes because we're only temporarily in DC right now. So that would be my logistical challenge, not yours. But
I understand. I was, thought the federal government might have had some rule that was longer than that, but
Nope.
you certainly answered my question. Thank you. Do you have any concluding questions?
I do. Just one last question. I talked about the fact that, care and feeding of selectmen was a big part of the job. The second big part of the job, I think, is dealing with issues with people that might have different, disparate views. And I talk about a term of getting to yes, and how important that is in any job, but particularly in a municipal one. Can you give us an example of a situation that you felt like you had differing opinions and you needed to get to yes, and how you might have done that, or what your approach would be in general for that?
yeah, I mean, again, working in municipal government, there are many, many opportunities to find yourself in the crossroads of different opinions, passionate opinions. Again, everyone thinks that they're doing the best thing for the town, and they're doing their job the best that they can. I guess going back to union contracts, I think is a good opportunity to talk about those differing opinions. The Board of Selectmen in Salem was very fiscally conservative, and rightfully so. I think going through the recession era taught a lot of towns lessons that you need to watch your spending even in the good times. So I think working with the board members, there are a couple board members who, after the end of our union negotiations, we made those health care changes. We had agreed upon some what we thought were market rate cost of living adjustments that the employees hadn't had for a number of years. And so we had all agreed to this as part of the negotiation package, and then we get out there and we got a couple of members going off in this direction, going off in this direction. And it was incumbent on me as the town manager to remind everybody what we had set out to do, that we had actually met our goal, and that we can't go back and start asking for more now, because that wouldn't be in good faith. And at the end of the day, we did end up getting those contracts agreed upon by the selectmen, brought them to town meeting approved them, and I think everyone ended up happy in the end. But it was not an easy process. Again, the town manager sometimes has to be the person who gives not bad news, but gives that advice that maybe nobody wants to hear, that, this is the best we can get in this situation. I think we should all be happy, and let's move forward with this. This is what we set out to do. And we set out, and then, again, we were looking at employee morale. That was my but you're also looking at taxpayer interest, which is the board, but I'm helping them do that. So you got a lot of competing interests, and as an effective town manager, you need to be able to balance all those things and get get everyone to yes, I guess. And I think union negotiations is one of the best opportunities to get everyone to a yes.
Truly. Thank you.
Leon, do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to share with us?
No, I just want to thank you again for your time, for inviting me here. This is certainly a special town. I don't have to tell you that, and
No, you don't.
it's an honor to be here, to be participating in this process, and it's a place that my family would certainly enjoy. I'm very much aware of that.
You did a great job. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you for flying up. Are you flying out tonight, or are you staying in town?
I've got a 6 a.m. flight in the morning.
Oh, yes. I'll be sleeping then, I hope.
Thank
A
you.
little while.
Thank you very much. You have truly a gentleman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leon.
I
Thank
guess
you.
we can actually say, and a statesman.
That's right. For another 30 days now.
Take care, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How did it get past him, he says?
We're going to go into executive session now.
To do what?
Thank you.
Talk about this.
We
So
can.
we can't deliberate about, I didn't think we could deliberate
There
about.
is an executive session.
I know, but I thought
Yeah.
an executive session would be like for contract negotiations. We can't talk about who we think in executive session, I don't think.
Who said anything about executive session?
Well, I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong. But I think we can only do executive session for contract negotiations. And if we wanna
Let's ask Alan here.
Yeah, Alan will know.
Don't look at us in that tone of voice.
So,
Question.
Can they go into executive session?
I don't think you can deliberate in executive session.
okay, well, that was a terrible idea, Catherine. All righty, so we need to talk about this, and so,
You can discuss contractual matters,
Yeah.
Executive session.
session, but I think the deliberation has to be.
okay. John, we're going to start.
So can I back up for a second?
Are you in an executive session?
No.
No.
Okay.
Are we all feeling
Are we on camera
that
still,
we're
or?
moving? Absolutely.
Shut it off?
No, no.
No, we're
Okay.
still in
Continue.
open session. Are we feeling like we're moving to a decision tonight, or
I
are we
don't
just?
know. That's why
okay.
we're going to talk.
Okay, I just didn't know if anyone had any
Somebody
preconceived
might
ideas.
here say, you know what, I really love so-and-so, and
Right.
the other people were far beneath that person. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I got
okay.
a tie with two. Who knows? That's why we're going to talk.
Okay, great,
And that,
love that.
Right, I agree.
so, John,
What are we going to talk about if we can't
Well-
talk about the candidates?
we're going to
Yeah.
talk about the candidates.
That's what we're gonna do. We have to, in open session,
Okay, we
discuss
saw
which
4 people.
candidate
Do you
that,
have a favorite? Do you have 2 favorites? What?
Oh, okay, I guess
I
I'm
think
not
Alan
following.
wanted to say
the-
something.
No, I was just going to say, I usually recommend that you talk positively about the candidate that you like the most. And after you go around the table doing that, we'll see whether there's any kind of consensus. And I always kind of try to discourage people from talking down about candidates that they may not be that interested in, because it is in public and these people, have
Yeah.
jobs and stuff like that. So,
I did like that person's tie. Did you, John?
It was quite colorful.
They all were ties.
I did not like the ant going across that table 4 times.
that was not our best moment.
But it wasn't,
It was distracting, so,
It was.
and I thought the candidate would be distracted. I'm not even sure the candidates are.
No, because that guy was, little guy
well,
was.
thank you, Jack, for allowing me to execute that poor ant.
Okay, John. we got
I've
4
got to say,
candidates.
I think, I'd like to thank you, Alan, for you and the committee for bringing forward 4 people that I think are all of good stature and good caliber.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely true.
Quite different in their backgrounds. This last gentleman, I guess I'm a little bit perplexed. I mean, he seems like he's at such a high level that how would he see his way into a town of this size and nature? Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't. I'm a little bit, yeah, I guess that would be my bigger concern, is how would he see his way into a very, maybe a very RFD type town.
We've had pretty extensive conversations with him, and I remember that he first called me about this when I was actually on vacation in Tennessee while the ad was running. And he called specifically to ask me about the process and what I thought, and we've had a good relationship over the years. We've done quite a bit of work here, so I was able to give him quite a bit of insight.
That's a good
I
point,
told him
yeah.
do his homework, and then I welcomed his application. I thought he'd be a pretty good fit. In talking to him as we go through the process, I think he's looking for roots for his family. I think he's tired of moving. I think he wants to make a difference. I think money is not the big factor to him. It's not the sole factor that motivates him. And I think that he sees the fit here. He'd very much like to be in this area of the state.
Catherine?
John, did you want
I have more to say, but go ahead, Catherine.
to?
I'm trying to digest it a little bit.
I don't know. I
We can
thought,
go around 2 or 3 times.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
probably going to have to. I think they're 4 very good candidates, and I thank Alan as well. I think, you know, we always ask our screening committees to make sure not to bring anyone forward that knowing anyone could be picked. So they did a good job with that. I think anyone could do this job. I think it might be important as we go through this to gel on a first and second, maybe, I don't know. I thought that Anthony and Sally had done a tremendous amount of homework. I thought he had a very honest and open and sincere demeanor and would not have any problem doing any job that he felt like he needed to do. So those were, I think, were his strengths. And this Leon, you know, clearly, I think even though he wants to get back, the experience of working in another country in the State Department probably has broadened his knowledge and, you know, the way he would look at things. His legal background is, can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I think in reading his resume and in reading his essays, his legal background is really pretty relevant. He's been able to use it in his municipal work. So I think at first, he's the only candidate who doesn't have an MPA, and at first I thought that might be an issue for me, but in reading things, I don't think it is. I guess I'll stop there for the moment.
Well, I think that the top 2 candidates, I agree with you, Catherine, and that, I don't know about the particular order, but I think that, first of all, they're all good.
They were all good.
You know, they're all good, and that they all have different personalities and different approaches, and some are less nervous than others, and that, but it was, you know, I think that you, MRI, and the search committee did a great job, and winning went down to these 4, and that I think very impressed with Leon, and that very impressed, and that I was also impressed with our first candidate, Anthony Ansaldi, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Yes.
And that those, I think you were saying, were our top 2. Those would be my top 2. But again, all 4 candidates, and that, was it Michael Rosen who could talk faster than me? That was interesting.
Let's not hold that against him. He's a New Yorker.
So let's, I'll turn it back to you,
I
John.
can relate to him.
Yeah, I think Mr. Ansaldi is probably, from a personality and a functional point of view, probably the best fit for the town of Wenham.
Who did you say?
I think he
Ansaldi.
would be,
Oh, okay.
Anthony
I missed
Ansaldi would be the best fit for the town of Wenham. I'm still trying to digest. We covered a lot of territory with 4
We did.
people.
We did.
I mean,
And there was lots more that we could have if we had time.
I
But
mean,
Well, we kind of ran out of, I didn't want to cut anybody off, but you do look like you're done asking questions.
well,
and we
yes,
didn't
the
want to
questions
embarrass
that you
so-
could ask in this kind of a forum.
Yeah,
But you know, there's always tons of
each
information.
one did present themselves quite
Yeah.
well.
yeah.
And asked a lot of good questions, or interacted with our questions quite
Yeah.
well. I don't know, is it-
Do you have a top 2, John?
Well, I think Anthony would be my number 1 choice. Dang.
You don't have to have a 2, I'm just saying if you don't.
Yeah,
It
just
helps
have a
in
1,
case
it's all right.
there's a difference, or
I guess I'd say Leon probably would be my number 2 also.
Well, here we are, we're down to 2. That was quick.
yeah, I think I wouldn't, if something horrible happened and those 2 people, you know, didn't feel like going forward or couldn't go forward, I think I could come up with a 3rd, and certainly, and 4th,
I
but.
think I could.
Getting back to Anthony, the things I wrote down, I thought I was impressed by the fact that he was very honest about the process in Littleton, because, you know, the first question is, why didn't he get that job? I thought that honesty was good. I thought he seemed very organized and said good things about staff being the biggest asset. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we want to hear. I thought he was, to the fit, eloquent, but also calm. And I think that bodes any town administrator well. It's interesting, again, what you think. I mean, we'd seen him before as a finance director candidate that we didn't put forward for, a variety of reasons. But he, I think, through his years, really wants to be a town administrator. And I think I see him as a better fit, whether here or anyplace else, as a town administrator than a finance director, even though he has a ton of financial background.
Well, we need that. We need that very badly, not to take anything from Patty whatsoever.
He's not a pure finance guy, though.
No,
Correct.
no, he's not.
He's a general manager, and that's
Yep.
what this position really is.
Yeah, he came, yeah.
He's got to get all the parts and
This
pieces
could
to
be-
fit together and work.
Could be way easier than I imagined.
I think that, I agree with your comments about Anthony, and that I liked his enthusiasm, I liked his candor, I liked his, the way he approached these questions, and that he didn't shy away from none of them wanted to ask my difficult questions.
No, but they did.
They tried. And what did you learn from that?
Yeah.
What was your biggest
That was
mistake?
the hard-
Anyway,
that was the hardest
you know,
part.
I only asked one hard one, so that there was other hard ones on there. But so I think that if I had to narrow my choices down from 2 to 1, it'd be Anthony.
He also seemed, he seemed interested in putting down roots as well. He seemed interested in putting down roots.
Yes,
I mean, he made a comment that I think he may regret, but he said something about, he thinks this could be the last stop in his career. That's an interesting point, and no one expects that to be the
You
case.
never know.
But it's nice to at least hear, and he seemed genuine, that he doesn't see this as a stepping stone. He'd be happy to be here, and
He seemed very genuine.
he
period.
seemed very genuine, and Wenham would appreciate that. I
That's
think.
why I said in the beginning, he seemed like the best fit for this community.
Well, we're ready to vote then?
You have any other words for us?
I think you just did a nice job. And I would not want to insert myself into
All right, good, well, you're ahead.
if the train is leaving the station, I'm not going to go on the track.
Go out on a high note.
That's why you get the big bucks, Alan.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we, working with MRI, that we commission MRI, you can give me the right words here, to offer a contract to Anthony Ansaldi. All three of us have seen the draft contract that we went through the other night with John Petrin. He marked it up for the changes that we all agreed to.
Yes.
And circulated that to the three of us, or at least I circulated it back to you two.
Yes,
after.
thank you.
And I did check everything. I checked back.
I did as well.
And he did everything that exactly as we'd asked. And that, so we have something we can give to Alan tonight. Obviously, the name is blank and the compensation is blank, but otherwise, it's a 3 or 4 page contract that was based more or less on Peter's last contract, as opposed to either one of the 2 samples that were given from MRI, which they're all fairly similar, but it was easy to mark up the last one, which we did. So I move that we commission MRI to enter into contract negotiations with Anthony Ansaldi for the town administrator position.
I'll second your motion.
Do we need to make this a conditional offer contingent upon background checks, whatever
My
else you
suggestion would be
do?
that you authorize us to make a conditional offer.
Yeah.
The conditions being satisfactory background investigation and successful negotiation of terms of employment. As soon as we get that back from him signed, we move forward with our background. I'll try to get that contract from Nikki in electronic format, so I'm able to send that to him. And then at some point, it will come back to you, because I can't make the decisions that you have to make.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so Catherine Tinsley, you got those words?
Authorize MRI to make a conditional offer.
Conditioned upon-
Conditional on the background check and successful negotiation.
That's it. I'll do that first thing in the morning.
And we have
So-
a second, right? Did
Yeah, we have a second.
Okay.
He filled in the motion for me in that.
Well, that's good, because that's his job.
Yeah, yeah.
He does it a
Okay.
lot more than
All in
we do.
favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. I'm glad it's unanimous, too, and that was,
Yeah,
Nicely done.
thank you.
Anthony's probably watching.
I hope he is.
Congratulations, Anthony.
Yeah.
And by the way, the other people, you did a great job.
Everyone did a great job. This was an extraordinary group of
Yeah,
people.
I'm very impressed and very pleased.
And,
Good job,
and-
Alan.
It's a pleasure to work with you folks again.
always a
This was a
pleasure.
little shorter than you thought. We moved along a little quicker.
It really is. And we figured out how Leon got by me.
Oh, yeah?
He was in the bathroom when I went out to
Oh.
golf, so we passed.
I figured there was a men's room thing
'Cause I
happening
stepped
there.
outside to get cell phone service.
Yeah, because you can't always.
Oh, yeah.
That was funny. Well, he kind of poked his
Well,
head
that'll
in.
be one of his
It's like I
problems to
was-
solve, is
He
figure
said, I
out how
was
to...
looking for Alan, but I don't see him. So we as the boards need to, at some point, I guess, soon, talk about in executive session, filling in the blanks in the contract. Is that
Yes.
right?
Well, it's one blank, compensation. Yeah, and it might be other blanks. There's no
There's
blanks,
other
but there
ones,
might be
yeah.
other conditions based on what Alan's
Right.
are going to be talking about with him.
So you'll be back to us, what, a few days a week?
Oh, probably beginning of the week. at
So
some point.
do you, in order to move forward with him, do you need to be talking to him at this point about what we're thinking about for compensation benefits and things like that? Because what the contract we have is a template.
Right. So I get a sense from him for what he's looking
Okay.
for. And then I'll talk to you folks about that.
Okay.
I'll shoot,
That seems
shoot you an email,
appropriate.
John. And then that may go back and forth, but I always recommend, I try to take myself out of the negotiations pretty early on.
Yep.
Because I think it's important that you develop that relationship
Yeah.
with that
We bonded.
administrator.
We bonded with our last town administrator over
And there's only so
Oh,
much I
God
can do,
almighty.
because I can't make decisions.
No.
So then it gets this tedious process of back and forth. And
Yeah.
So what I recommend is, I tell people, I get you to the church, you gotta find the right pew. So once we get it close, I say, you should just meet with him, have a
Yeah.
meeting with him, non-public, iron out the executive session, iron out the details, and everybody's happy.
And
Okay.
of course, you'll let us know whether or not he accepts our
Absolutely.
conditional offer.
I suspect
I
he'll be very
suspect you
excited
will,
when I talk to him in
but-
about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All three other very disappointed people.
Yeah, and that's always sad.
Well,
they
I
did
think
a
you
good
can
job.
commend all
Yeah.
three, all four, but
Sure.
all three.
They'll probably watch
That,
this.
It's on YouTube. They're
they
watching
all
it.
made it easy for us because they all came, it wasn't, you had to weed out somebody with some problem or some issue or some concern. I mean, I
Well, the
saw,
search
I
committee
saw,
would've
or
done
heard
that for
nothing
us.
from my fellow board members that caused me any concern whatsoever, and I didn't have any. So they all did a wonderful,
They did.
wonderful job.
And-
This was actually a pretty rare final field that you had, because very often, there's one person that's kind of rises above all others, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, I sure hope they picked that person, because those others just really, they were a little more risk. And in this case, honestly, out of those four, I don't see any risk.
That's, I could work with all four.
Yeah, yeah. And it just came down to the nuance of the
And yet they were
the
all so different.
chemistry and the fit, I think.
Yeah.
And if he turns it down, I'll be back to you folks, and you can tell me if there's a number two, and authorize me to do the same thing.
Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna hope not get that call.
Okay, I move
Thank
to
you, Alan.
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.